Hello everyone, Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn in JJK and Maki is My Lover, Harem. Part 3. If you enjoy this content, smash the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description.
The concrete steps of the pedestrian overpass were cold, but Ren didn't care. He sat near the top, hidden from the main street, actively massaging his right calf with a forced wince just in case anyone was looking. He had told Yuji he cramped up walking from the station. The kid, being an absolute saint, had immediately insisted Ren sit down and rest while he took the first watch for Junpei down by the crosswalk. Ren let out a heavy breath, dropping his hands from his leg. The fake cramp was just an excuse to get 5 minutes alone. The concrete steps of the pedestrian overpass were cold, but Ren didn't care. He sat near the top, hidden from the main street, before his mind could start running through the tactical nightmare of dealing with Mahito and Kenjaku again. His phone vibrated sharply in his jacket pocket.
Ren frownede.
He pulled the device out, expecting a text from Maki demanding an update. Instead, the screen showed an unknown number, but the prefix belonged to Jujutsu High's secure internal network. He swiped to answer, bringing the phone to his ear. "Hello. I suddenly have a free hour." Shoko Yeri's dry, slightly raspy voice came through the speaker. "And I want coffee. Real coffee. Not the sludge in the break room." Ren blinked, completely caught off guard. "Dr. Yeri? Get back to the morgue," Shoko ordered flatly. "And don't waste time, or I might change my mind and lock the doors." Click. The line went dead. Ren slowly lowered the phone, staring at the black screen for a long second. He dragged his hand down his face, letting out a heavy, deeply exasperated sigh. "What now?" he muttered to the empty stairwell. Between a literal 1,000-year-old brain in a jar plotting the end of the world and a special grade curse grooming a bullied teenager, the school's primary doctor deciding right now was the perfect time to cash in a flirtatious coffee offer was absurd. Ren stood up, brushing the concrete dust off his jeans. He walked down the stairs, avoiding the crosswalk where Yuji was intensely focused on a distant figure. Instead, Ren circled back down the block toward the black sedan parked by the curb. Ichichi was standing by the driver's side door, anxiously tapping a pen against his clipboard while scanning the street. He jumped slightly as Ren approached.
Ren-kun?
Ichichi blinked, quickly adjusting his glasses. "Is everything all right? Where is Itadori-kun? Did you spot the target?" "Yuji's got eyes on him. He's fine," Ren said easily, waving a hand to cut off the nervous rambling. "Listen, Ichichi-san. I just got a call from the Madam Doctor." Ichichi stopped tapping his pen. "Yeri-san? Why would she be calling you?" "Something about some important medical follow-up regarding my condition." "I don't really get it," Ren lied smoothly, rubbing the back of his neck. "But she told me to get back to the clinic right now. Sounded pretty serious about it. You know how she gets." Ichichi visibly paled at the implication of an annoyed Shoko Yeri. As the assistant director, he was terrified of basically every senior staff member, but Shoko was near the top of that list. "Ah, yes, I completely understand," Ichichi stammered, nodding rapidly. "Medical directives override field observations, especially for non-combatants." "Exactly," Ren agreed, taking a step back. "So you and Yuji just focus here. Tell Nanami I had to step away for a medical thing. Don't worry about driving me. I'll just grab the train back to Tokyo so you guys keep the car." "Are you sure? I could call another assistant manager too." "I've got it covered, Ichichi-san." "Good luck with the fly," Ren called over his shoulder, already turning and walking away down the pavement. He didn't wait for a response, slipping seamlessly into the afternoon foot traffic. The walk to the station was a straightforward blur of gray concrete and bustling afternoon crowds. Before hitting the turnstiles, he ducked into a small, quiet cafe tucked away from the main street. He didn't bother looking at the specialty menu. 2 large dark roasts, black. The strongest you have, Run told the barista, dropping a few bills on the counter. 5 minutes later, armed with a cardboard carrier holding 2 steaming cups, he swiped his transit card and boarded the northbound train back to Tokyo. The train car was mostly empty this time of day. Run took a corner seat, setting the carrier on his lap. He pulled out his phone, quickly checking the time. It was just past 4 in the afternoon. The train ride bled into a short bus transfer, and by the time Ren was walking up the long, winding mountain path toward the hidden gates of Tokyo Jujitsu High, the coffee in his hands had cooled to a perfectly drinkable temperature. The campus was eerily quiet. Most of the students were either out on missions or running drills on the athletic fields. Ren didn't linger to enjoy the scenery. He bypassed the main courtyard entirely, taking the familiar stone path that led down toward the school's subterranean medical ward. The air grew noticeably colder the deeper he went. The faint, earthy smell of the mountain was quickly replaced by the sharp, sterile scent of industrial bleach and burnt tobacco. Ren reached the heavy metal doors of the morgue. He didn't bother knocking. He just pushed his shoulder against the heavy door and stepped inside. Shoko Yeri was sitting at her desk in the corner, a lit cigarette dangling loosely between her lips as always. She had a mountain of paperwork pushed aggressively to one side of her desk, her feet propped up on the edge of the metal filing cabinet. She didn't look up immediately. She just took a slow drag of her cigarette, exhaling a thin plume of gray smoke toward the ceiling. 42 minutes, Shoko noted, her voice dry and completely devoid of inflection. I was beginning to think you got lost in Kawasaki. Trains were slow, Ren lied smoothly. He walked across the room, pulling one of the paper cups from the carrier and setting it down right next to her boots on the desk. Dark roast, black, as requested. Shoko finally shifted her gaze. Her brown eyes, framed by deep, chronic dark circles, flicked from the coffee cup up to Ren's face. She stared at him for a long second. She reached out, picking up the cup. She took a sip, letting out a quiet hum of approval. Not bad, Shoko murmured. She lowered her feet from the desk and leaned forward, resting her elbows on the metal surface. Now,
Sit down, Ren.
you and I are going to have a little chat. Ren cautiously pulled out the rickety metal folding chair opposite her desk and sat down. He kept his posture relaxed, though internally he was bracing himself. Shoko Yeri was sharp. If Satoru Gojo was a chaotic hurricane of overwhelming power, Shoko was a scalpel, precise, clinical, and completely unimpressed by bullshit. So, Shoko began, leaning back in her chair and crossing her arms. Your cursed energy is essentially the exact same as Maki's, correct? Extremely low, basically non-sorcerer, civilian levels. Ren frowned, narrowing his eyes slightly. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. You're the primary medical examiner for the entire Tokyo branch, Dr. Yeri, Ren interrupted smoothly, his tone leveling out. You already know exactly what my energy levels are. So why are you asking me a question you already have the answer to? Shoko paused. The corner of her mouth twitched upward in a dry, genuinely amused smirk. She took a slow drag of her cigarette, the cherry burning bright orange for a second before she exhaled a thick cloud of smoke, tapping her ashes into a glass tray on her desk. I'm asking, Ren, because Satoru, in his infinite, relentlessly annoying wisdom, requested me to teach you something.
Ren blinked.
Something? Yes, Shoko deadpanned. He requested me to teach you reverse curse technique.
Ren stared her.
The morgue was completely silent for 3 full seconds, save for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. His brain completely stalled out. What? You heard me? Shoko sighed, picking up her coffee cup and taking a long, highly caffeinated sip. He told me to teach you how to heal yourself with RCT, like it's some sort of casual parlor trick that anyone can pick up on a Thursday afternoon. RCT? Ren asked, tilting his head and forcing a look of complete, blank confusion. Internally, he knew exactly what it was, but Satoru had only vaguely talked about his new strength, and Maki certainly hadn't given him a lecture on techniques. Technically, he wasn't supposed to know anything beyond the absolute basics. I'm guessing that doesn't stand for root canal treatment. Neither Satoru nor Maki have actually explained what that is yet. Shoko closed her eyes and let out a long, slow exhale that fluttered the collar of her lab coat. Of course they haven't. Leaving all the work to me, Shoko muttered, looking like she severely needed a stronger drink than coffee. She leaned back, resting her elbow on the arm of her chair, and pointed her cigarette at him. Listen closely. I'll give you the idiot's version. Normal cursed energy is fundamentally negative. It's born from stress, fear, anger, and disgust. It is inherently destructive. She gestured vaguely to the empty metal autopsy tables in the room. If you get a hole punched through your stomach and you try to jam regular cursed energy into the wound, you aren't going to fix it. You're just going to make a worse, messier hole. Ren nodded slowly, playing the attentive student perfectly. Reverse curse technique, Shoko continued, her tone slipping into the crisp, no-nonsense cadence of a medical professional, is the process of taking two sources of that negative energy and multiplying them against each other inside your own body. Negative times negative equals positive. It creates positive energy, which regenerates human tissue. Run let out a low whistle, rubbing the back of his neck. Multiply negative by negative. Sounds like basic math. It is basic math. But doing it while you are actively bleeding to death is like trying to solve calculus in your head while getting hit by a train. Shoko deadpanned. She took another drag of her cigarette, the cherry burning bright orange, before exhaling the smoke toward the ceiling. Her brown eyes shifted back down, locking onto his with a sharp, piercing intensity. I am one of the only people in this entire country who can output it to heal others. Even Satoru can only use it to heal himself, and it took him literally getting his throat slashed open to finally figure it out, she said. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, looking at him with a mix of curiosity and deep, profound exhaustion. So, considering you have the cursed energy capacity of a damp AA battery, and the mental gymnastics required to pull this off is basically magical quantum physics. Tell me, Run, Shoko asked, her voice perfectly flat. Does that sound like something that can just be taught? Rin slowly leaned back against the rickety metal folding chair, letting the silence stretch as he stared up at the fluorescent lights. He crossed his arms, dropping the facade of total confusion and letting a genuinely analytical frown take over his features. Okay, let me make sure I'm getting the logic here, Rin murmured, piecing it together aloud. Humans are able to heal with this complex, positive energy. But cursed spirits are literally made out of negative energy, right? So, it's infinitely easier for them to heal because they don't have to do any math at all. They can just heal directly from negative cursed energy. Shoko didn't say anything right away. She just took a slow sip of her dark roast, her dark, exhausted eyes watching him over the rim of the cup. Finally, she gave a single, slow nod. Exactly, Shoko said, lowering the cup. For a curse, regenerating a limb is as easy as breathing. They just push their natural energy into the wound. No multiplication required. Run tapped his fingers against his bicep. The tactical calculus in his head was already spinning, moving far past the idea of simply patching up his own injuries. Then, Run started, his dark eyes snapping back down to meet hers. Shouldn't positive energy be highly lethal to curses? If they are purely negative constructs, hitting them with pure positive energy should be like pouring bleach on a shadow, right? Shoko's lips twitched. The faint, genuinely bored expression returned to her face. She took a slow drag of her cigarette, exhaled, and nodded again. It is. It's absolute poison to them, Shoko confirmed, her tone dropping into that crisp register. If you can output pure positive energy directly into a cursed spirit, it will instantly eradicate almost any of them. It completely destabilizes their physical composition and vaporizes them on contact. Ren rubbed his chin, his mind racing. He didn't care about healing right now. So, Ren murmured slowly, squinting at the empty metal autopsy tables as the ultimate idea formed in his head. If that's true, isn't there some way to somehow imbue a cursed tool with positive cursed energy? Like channeling it into a blade instead of a person? Because if someone could do that, wouldn't it essentially create a one-hit kill weapon against any curse? She let out a slow, disbelieving exhale, shaking her head. She reached over, tapping the ash into her glass tray. Ren kept his face neutral, though he felt a small spike of triumph. So, I'm right? It would work. In pure, isolated theory? Yes, Shoko said, picking up her coffee cup again. She took a sip, her brown eyes locking onto him over the rim. But in actual, practical application, it's basically impossible. For 3 very glaring reasons. She set the cup down and held up a single finger. First, the rarity of the output. Like I told you, creating positive energy inside your own body to heal yourself is already incredibly difficult. But pushing that energy outward, outputting it into another person, or in your hypothetical, into an inanimate object, is a completely different beast. Satoru Gojo, the strongest sorcerer alive, cannot output positive energy. To my knowledge, the only people who can are myself, one of our second-year students currently studying overseas, and maybe a legendary curse or two. If you can't output it, you can't code a weapon in it. She raised a second finger. Second, the energy cost. You remember the math? Negative times negative. Because you have to multiply cursed energy against itself, it costs roughly twice as much energy to produce a single drop of positive energy. Constantly channeling that into a blade during an active, high-speed fight would violently drain almost any sorcerer's reserves in seconds. You'd be left completely exhausted and wide open for a killing blow. Ren frowned, his tactical mind chewing on the logistics. Okay, but what if you didn't channel it live? What if you imbued the weapon beforehand? Made it a permanent curse tool like Maki's glasses? Shoko smirked, holding up her third finger. That brings us to the third and final reason, the physical mechanics of cursed tools. Standard cursed tools are created when a sorcerer's negative cursed energy naturally seeps into an object over months or years of constant, agonizing use. They are essentially sponges for negative emotion. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk, her gaze piercing. But positive energy isn't a sponge. It's highly volatile. It is fundamentally designed to obliterate negative energy. If you try to force a charge of pure positive energy into a regular weapon, it won't hold the charge. The positive energy will just violently eat away at whatever residual negative energy is already in the metal, and it will end up destroying the medium holding it. Finding a way to make an object permanently hold a positive charge without it dissipating or shattering the blade is an art that modern jujitsu society simply does not possess. Shoko leaned back in her chair, taking another long drag of her cigarette. She exhaled a thick cloud of smoke, looking at Ren with a mixture of profound exhaustion and genuine respect. So, congratulations, Ren. You just invented the ultimate anti-curse weapon in your head. She deadpanned. Now you just have to find a sorcerer with a bottomless gas tank, an impossibly rare output ability, and a magical blacksmith capable of doing something no one has done in 1,000 years to actually build it for you. Run let out a long, slow breath, running a hand through his dark hair. The sheer magnitude of the hurdle Shoko had just casually listed out would have been enough to make most sorcerers give up entirely. "Ah," Rin muttered. Leaning back in his chair and staring up at the fluorescent lights, Run dragged a hand down his face, letting out a heavy, deeply exasperated sigh. The sheer magnitude of the hurdle Shoko had just casually listed out would have been enough to make most sorcerers give up entirely. "So, let me get this straight," Rin muttered, looking at her through his fingers. "He sent me down here to learn a technique I physically lack the battery power for." Shoko took another drag of her cigarette, her expression unimpressed. "Welcome to my world. F. Gojo," Rin stated bluntly. "Agreed," Shoko replied without missing a beat. She raised her paper coffee cup in a mock toast. "He is a relentless, walking migraine. I've been telling the higher-ups to just deport him for years." Run let out a short laugh, the tension in his shoulders finally dropping an inch. He watched as Shoko stood up, turning her back to him to begin sorting through a stack of manila folders on the stainless steel counter behind her desk. "Do you ever actually leave this basement, Doc?" Ren asked, leaning forward on his knees. "Or do they just slide trays of coffee and cigarettes under the door to keep you running?" "I leave when people stop doing stupid things and dying," Shoko answered dryly, flipping through a medical chart. "So no, I basically live under these fluorescent lights."
Sounds tragic. Rain mused.
"How long have you been putting up with Satoru's nonsense? Anyway, did you lose a bet with the principal?" "Worse?" Shoko sighed, the sound heavy with years of suffering. "We were classmates. I've been dealing with him since we were teenagers." She gestured blindly over her shoulder toward her desk. "Grab me a black pen from that top right drawer, will you? Mine just ran out of ink." "Yeah, got it," Rin said. He leaned over and pulled the desk drawer open. It was a messy collection of loose paper clips, spare lighters, and medical tape. But sitting right on top of a notepad was a faded Polaroid photograph. Run reached for the pen, but his eyes locked onto the image. It was a picture of 3 teenagers in jujitsu high uniforms. On the right was a grinning Satoru Gojo wearing stupid round sunglasses. On the left was a girl with short brown hair, looking mildly annoyed but entirely lacking the deep, soul-crushing eye bags she currently sported. But it was the guy in the middle that made Ren's pulse jump in his throat. Dark hair tied half up, a serene, disarming smile. Ghetto. The exact same man he had bumped into in the Harajuku alleyways. The monk leading the disaster curses. He picked up the photo, looking from the glossy paper to the exhausted woman standing at the counter, and then back to the paper. He threw his head back and unleashed the loudest, most obnoxious reaction he could muster. "Wawa-a-away-it." Shoko actually flinched at the volume, her cigarette dropping a clump of ash onto the floor. She spun around, glaring at him. "Doctor, is this you?" Rin practically yelled, holding the photo up like he had just discovered a mythical artifact. He looked at the picture, then squinted hard at her face. "No way. You look so lively. You look rested. What happened?" Shoko's expression instantly flattened into a terrifyingly blank stare. The ambient hum of the morgue's refrigerator suddenly sounded incredibly loud. "Put that back," she ordered, her voice dropping a dangerous octave. "Did Gojo literally steal your youth?" Rin teased, keeping the photo just out of her immediate reach, playing the annoying teenager flawlessly to mask his racing thoughts. "This is tragic. We need to get you a spa day or something." "Satoru stole my will to live," Shoko corrected dryly. She closed the distance in 2 strides and snatched the photo out of his hand with surprising speed, tossing it back into the drawer and slamming it shut. She leaned over the desk, her brown eyes narrowing at him through the curling cigarette smoke. And if you mention how lively I used to look to Maki or anyone else, Shoko threatened, her tone perfectly level but laced with genuine danger. I will personally ensure your next physical involves a very large, unlubricated needle. Do we understand each other? Crystal clear document. Your secret is safe with me. Rin stepped out of the heavy metal doors of the morgue, leaving the sterile scent of bleach and stale tobacco smoke behind him. He let out a massive, jaw-cracking yawn, stretching his arms high above his head until his shoulders gave a satisfying pop. His body processed physical fatigue with terrifying efficiency thanks to his newly acquired heavenly restriction. Pulling his phone from his pocket, he thumbed the screen open as he walked up the subterranean stone path. He bypassed his messages and opened his photo gallery, scrolling to a locked folder. It was filled with numerous photos of Maki. There was the spicy photo in his oversized t-shirt she had sent from the dorms, the candid 3-second timer shot of her tying up her damp green hair, and a few blurry ones from their peaceful Shibuya shopping date. He stopped scrolling and tapped on one of his absolute favorites. It was a slightly chaotic, off-center shot he had managed to snap right as she was aggressively lunging to snatch the phone out of his hand. Her face flushed a furious, vibrant crimson and her wire-rimmed glasses slightly askew. Despite her lethal reputation as a walking cactus, she looked undeniably, ridiculously cute. Grinning to himself, Ren hit the settings menu and set it as his lock screen wallpaper. It was a massive operational risk given the strict necessity of keeping their relationship a secret, but he decided it was worth it. He locked the screen, his smile slowly fading as the cold mountain air hit his face. The brief moment of domestic normalcy evaporated, replaced by the grim tactical reality of his situation. What's the next move? He thought, rubbing the back of his neck. He had successfully ducked out of the Kawasaki stakeout, leaving Yuji and Ajichi to monitor Junpei Yoshino with the flyhead curse. He already possessed the meta-knowledge of the entire jujitsu world and knew exactly how the disaster with Mahito was going to escalate. With his system balance drained but his new grade 1 katana, Nightfall, sitting in his dimensional inventory, he finally had a weapon capable of effortlessly severing dense cursed armor. But raw firepower wasn't enough. Intercepting Mahito before the special grade could completely groom the bullied teenager or transfigure more innocent humans required flawless timing. If he moved too early, Kenjaku might catch wind of an anomaly interfering with the timeline. If he moved too late, Junpei would die. Just as he stepped out into the fading afternoon light of the main campus courtyard, his phone vibrated violently against his thigh. Ren paused, his combat instincts flaring for a fraction of a second. He pulled the device back out, expecting an angry text from Maki demanding his location or a panicked call from Ajichi asking him to return to Kawasaki. Instead, the screen lit up with an incoming call from a completely different number. He swiped the green icon and cautiously brought the phone to his ear. "Hello, Moshi Mosh." A bright, obnoxiously cheerful voice sang through the speaker. "Is this Tokyo's newest, most tragic anomaly? How is my favorite transfer student doing on this lovely afternoon?" Ren closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. A dull headache immediately began to pulse behind his temples. "Of course, Gojo-sensei," Ren deadpanned, his voice completely devoid of enthusiasm. "Shouldn't you be busy annoying the Kyoto elders right now?" "Oh, I am," Gojo declared, sounding entirely too happy about it. Principal Gakuganji is currently in the middle of a very long, very boring lecture about respect and tradition. I tuned him out about 20 minutes ago. So, I thought I'd check in on my precious student. Tell me, did you enjoy your little private study session with Shoko? Ren's eye twitched. He leaned his back against the cold stone wall of the campus courtyard. "You dragged me all the way back from an active field investigation just to send me to the morgue. It's called independent study, Renkuin, a crucial part of youth," Gojo countered breezily over the line. So, did you master it? Did my brilliant, beautiful doctor friend teach you the secrets of reverse curse technique? Run let out a heavy, incredibly flat sigh, staring up at the darkening sky. He decided to lean entirely into the absurdity of the question. Oh, absolutely, Rin replied, his voice dripping with thick, unapologetic sarcasm. It was incredibly easy, actually. Barely an inconvenience. Really? Gojo asked, his tone laced with feigned, dramatic gasp. A prodigy. Yeah, definitely, Rin continued smoothly, matching the sarcastic energy perfectly. Turns out, taking my cursed energy, which is squashed to near zero, and multiplying it against my other near-zero cursed energy is basic arithmetic. I am practically a glowing, radiant beacon of positive energy right now. I was actually just thinking about walking back to Kawasaki and healing the concept of death itself. A loud, booming laugh echoed through the speaker. Satoru Gojo was clearly enjoying this entirely too much. I knew I picked a winner. Gojo laughed, the sound vibrating slightly through the phone's bad connection. I bet Shoko looked like she wanted to staple my picture to a dartboard. Didn't she? She mentioned wanting to deport you, actually, Rin corrected dryly. She also threatened me with a very large, unlubricated needle if I ever mention how rested she used to look. Ah, the nostalgia. Gojo sighed happily. The line went quiet for a fraction of a second before Gojo's tone shifted, laced with genuine, almost impressed amusement. You know, I have to admit, your little flirting routine actually kind of worked.
Koloi me impressed, Rein-kun.
Ren leaned the back of his head against the cold stone wall of the campus courtyard, staring up at the darkening sky. I have literally no idea what you're talking about. Oh, please. Shoko usually doesn't agree to teach anyone anything. Gojo chuckled, the sound vibrating through the phone's bad connection. When I called and asked her to give you a crash course in RCT, I was honestly just messing around to see how fast she'd kick you out. I fully expected her to lock the morgue doors on you and throw away the key. But she actually sat you down, drank your coffee, and explained the math. You've got a gift. It was a very short, very insulting explanation, Rin pointed out flatly. Still counts.
Gojo-san.
Then, the ambient background noise of the Kyoto faculty room seemed to fade entirely, and Gojo's voice dropped into a smooth, playfully dangerous register. But let me give you a little friendly advice from your favorite sensei. You better not make a habit of hitting on my beautiful doctor friend, because if you do, I might just accidentally leak that information to a certain green-haired, spear-wielding student of mine. Rin didn't even blink. Are you threatening me with domestic violence, Gojo-sensei? I'm just saying Maki wouldn't just break your heart, Rin-kun. She would systematically shatter every single bone in your body, Gojo said, sounding entirely too cheerful about the prospect of his student's grisly murder. And as her teacher, I'd have to just sit back and watch. Tragic, really? Oh no, please, anything but that, Rin replied, his voice dripping with thick, unapologetic sarcasm.
I'm absolutely terrified.
Trembling in my newly acquired, heavenly restricted boots as we speak. Run let out a heavy sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose to stave off the incoming headache. For the record, offering a severely sleep-deprived woman a cup of coffee isn't hitting on her. It's called basic human decency. You should look the concept up sometime. It might save you from getting officially deported by the school administration. A loud, booming laugh echoed through the speaker. Decency is so boring, though. Anyway, I've got to get back to actively ignoring Principal Gakuganji before he bursts a blood vessel. Try not to cause any major incidents while I'm gone. Okay? Bye-bye. Click. The line went dead. Rin shoved the phone back into his jacket pocket and pushed off the cold stone wall, letting out a long, slow breath into the cooling evening air. I have to admit, Ren muttered to the empty courtyard, shaking his head with a wry, exasperated smile. For all the absolute migraine-inducing headaches he causes, Satoru Gojo is unquestionably the biggest troll in all of JJK. But goddamn, the guy has the biggest aura to back it up. It was true. Even through a terrible cell connection from hundreds of miles away, Gojo's sheer presence and intellect were suffocating. You never truly knew if he was just messing around like a hyperactive child or if he was playing 4D chess, casually predicting your every move. It was a terrifying line to walk. But right now, Gojo's trolling was a blessing. By completely dismissing Ren's threat level and focusing on teasing him about Shoko and Maki, Gojo had unwittingly given Ren the perfect, unquestionable alibi. He had complete freedom to move. Ren pulled up the time on his phone screen. The sun was already beginning its descent, casting long, deep orange shadows across the campus stones. Ren shoved the phone back into his jacket pocket and pushed off the cold stone wall, letting out a long, slow breath into the cooling evening air. He started walking down the winding stone path toward the school's exit. He had a brief window to move before things in Kawasaki escalated completely out of control. System, Ren muttered under his breath, keeping his eyes on the path ahead. The familiar, glowing blue holographic interface materialized in his field of vision, its soft light cutting through the creeping shadows of the campus. I just dropped $5,000 to get Nightfall to grade 1, Ren whispered, his tactical mind crunching the numbers for the battles ahead. What's the price tag to push a weapon past the ceiling? How much to upgrade a grade 1 curse tool to special grade? The blue panel flickered. A line of crisp, white text scrolled across his vision. System notification. Weapon upgrade tier, special grade. Cost, 50,000 system points. Ren actually stumbled mid-step, his boot catching on a cobblestone. He caught his balance, staring at the massive number floating in front of him. 50,000? Ren hissed, rubbing the back of his neck. He currently had a balance of just 1,095 points. Given that a standard grade 3 kill only yielded 5 system points, the math was agonizing. I'd have to depopulate the entire cursed spirit ecosystem of Tokyo to farm that. But the system wasn't done. The holographic panel expanded, dumping a fresh block of data into his vision. System addendum. Special grade imbuement mechanics. Notice, reaching special grade classification fundamentally alters the molecular and spiritual structure of a cursed tool. Upon ascending to special grade, the weapon will naturally develop and permanently house an innate curse technique. User option unlocked. Directed imbuement. Description. The user may bypass the weapon's natural development and manually select a specific curse technique to imbue into the weapon. The user must possess a fundamental, theoretical understanding of the desired technique's mechanics to select it.
Regenfroos.
The evening breeze rustled the trees around him, but he barely registered the sound. His mind instantly snapped back to the sterile, fluorescent-lit morgue and the exhausted doctor with the dark circles. Shoko had literally just given him a crash course on the mechanics of reverse curse technique, multiplying negative energy by negative energy to create positive, curse-obliterating energy. She had explicitly told him it was practically impossible to permanently charge a weapon with positive energy because the metal couldn't hold the volatile charge without shattering. But the system didn't care about the established laws of jujitsu. The system was an absolute, out-of-the-world thing. Wait, Ren breathed, his pulse ticking up. System, because I understand the theoretical framework of reverse curse technique now. Could I manually imbue Nightfall with RCT? Could I make a special grade sword that permanently outputs positive energy? The interface chimed instantly. Affirmative. The user possesses sufficient knowledge of reverse curse technique to select it for directed imbuement. Warning. Directed imbuement requires an additional expenditure of system points based on the complexity of the selected technique. Imbuing reverse curse technique will incur a severe premium cost. Of course it does, Rin muttered, letting out a sharp, incredulous laugh. So, what happens if I just pay the baseline 50 grand and don't pick a technique? If directed imbuement is not utilized, the cursed tool will absorb ambient negative energy and naturally manifest a random cursed technique aligned with its existing traits, e.g., Nightfall's anti-regeneration field. Ren stared at the glowing blue text, the tactical puzzle pieces snapping into place. 50,000 points? Ren repeated, the number leaving a sour, metallic taste in his mouth. He dropped his hand from his glasses, the cool evening breeze rustling the collar of his jacket. If grinding low-level curses only yielded 5 points a kill, reaching that threshold before the Shibuya incident, let alone tomorrow, was a statistical nightmare. Ren turned his back on the sprawling Jiu-Jitsu high campus and started down the mountain path at a brisk jog. The gravel of the mountain path crunched steadily under Ren's boots. As he reached the bottom of the long descent, the subtle, static-like pressure of the Jiu-Jitsu high barrier washed over his skin, fading the second he stepped past the hidden torii gates. He didn't head for the train station. Public transit was too passive, and sitting in a crowded car wouldn't put a dent in a 50,000-point deficit. Inventory, Ren murmured into the quiet evening air. The translucent gray grid materialized. He bypassed the first slot holding the short, familiar shape of the Wraith's Fong and reached his hand into the spatial distortion of the second slot. His fingers wrapped around a tightly bound hilt. Ren left the main roads behind. He stuck to the narrow commercial alleys and abandoned lots stretching between Tokyo and Kawasaki. Public transit was faster, but the stations were too well lit and populated. He purposely walked past overflowing dumpsters, broken streetlights, and damp concrete, the exact places where negative energy naturally gathered. Nightfall hung loosely in his right hand. The dark scabbard blended perfectly into the evening gloom. He didn't have to wait long. 3 blocks from a rundown pachinko parlor, the air noticeably dropped a few degrees. Ren turned the corner into a dead-end alley littered with broken pallets and garbage bags. Clinging to the brick wall was a swollen, insect-like curse the size of a minivan. A solid grade 3. It clicked its mandibles, several bulging eyes locking onto him. Ren didn't break his stride. He planted his left foot, his thumb snapping the guard of his katana up. The blade hissed cleanly out of the scabbard. The curse lunged, a flurry of barbed legs swiping at his head.
Ren ducked.
He pivoted on his heel, stepping smoothly inside the creature's guard, and brought Nightfall up in a brutal, two-handed diagonal slash. The grade 1 steel sheared completely through the creature's thick outer shell, severing it from hip to shoulder. The curse dissolved into a massive cloud of heavy purple ash. A familiar blue screen materialized in his peripheral vision. Target eliminated. Grade 3. Reward. +5 system points. Milestone progress. Exorcise 100 grade 3 curses. 3/100. Ren flicked the blade to the side, scattering the residual ash. He sheathed the sword and kept walking. The hours dragged. Ren treated the trek through Kawasaki's industrial sector as a tactical sweep. He bypassed the main roads entirely, sticking to the service alleys, abandoned lots, and the spaces underneath elevated train tracks. At 1:15 a.m., he found 2 dog-like curses fighting over a dead rat near a closed auto shop. He took the first one's head off before it noticed him, then drove the blade straight down through the spine of the second as it tried to scramble away. Target eliminated. Grade 3. Reward. +5 system points. At 3:40 a.m., a lanky, multi-jointed curse tried to drop on him from the roof of a toll booth. Ren sidestepped the ambush without looking up, letting the creature slam into the asphalt. Before it could recover, he buried Nightfall into its chest cavity and twisted the hilt. Target eliminated. Grade 3. Reward +5 system points. He didn't use flashy martial arts. He didn't waste energy on acrobatics. It was just raw, brutal efficiency. Step, slash, kill, move. His body didn't fail him. The heavenly restriction absorbed the physical strain effortlessly. His breathing stayed level and his heart rate barely spiked. But he found himself staring blankly at the ash dissolving on the pavement longer each time before forcing his feet to move to the next target. By 6:00 a.m., the sky turned a flat, pale gray. The temperature dropped, leaving a cold dampness in the air. Run stood in a rusted scrapyard on the edge of the city. He wiped a streak of dark ash off his cheek with the back of his hand, looking down at the dissolving remains of a heavy, tortoise-like curse. By 8 a.m., the city was fully awake. A low rumble of commuter trains echoed overhead, and the streets filled with early morning traffic. Ren stood in the deep shadows beneath a concrete highway overpass, completely out of sight from the pedestrians walking a block away. He rested the flat of the scabbard against his shoulder. At his feet, the bottom half of a bloated, insectoid curse slowly dissolved into ash. A loud, distinct chime rang in his head. The blue holographic interface expanded directly in front of him. Target eliminated. Grade 3. Reward +5 system points. Milestone progress. Exorcise 100 Grade 3 curses. 97/100. Ren exhaled slowly, watching his breath form a faint cloud in the cold morning air. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone.
8:07 a.m.
3 more, Ren muttered to the empty underpass. Before he could take a single step out from the shadows of the overpass, the phone in his hand vibrated violently. The screen lit up. The caller ID simply read, Nanami Kento. Ren suppressed a groan. He swiped the green icon and brought the phone to his ear, keeping his voice perfectly level. Nanami-sensei, morning. Where are you? Nanami's voice came through the speaker. It wasn't actively angry, but the deep, flat baritone carried a severe, unmistakable undercurrent of impatience. Yeri-san informed me your medical evaluation concluded hours ago. If you took the express train, you should have been back in Kawasaki by dawn. Yeah, about that, Ren lied smoothly, his mind working in overdrive. I grabbed the wrong transfer at Shinagawa, ended up on a local line going the opposite direction. I just got off at the station. I'm literally 5 minutes away. Nanami let out a slow, deeply exhausted sigh. The sound of a car door slamming echoed in the background. Get to Satazakura High School immediately, Nanami ordered. The professional courtesy in his tone was completely gone, replaced by the crisp, rigid cadence of a sorcerer stepping onto a battlefield. The situation has drastically escalated. Yoshino Junpei has erected a veil over the school gymnasium. He is actively attacking the students. Ren's grip tightened on the phone. The timeline was completely fractured. Mahito had already made his move. Where is Yuji? Ren asked. He broke protocol and engaged the target, Nanami stated bluntly. I am en route, but the traffic is completely deadlocked. Get there, Ren. Do not let Itadori fight alone. And if you see the patchwork curse, do not approach him. Run. Click. The line went dead. Ren lowered the phone. The morning air suddenly felt suffocatingly heavy. If Yuji was already inside the school fighting Junpei, Mahito was waiting in the wings. 3, Ren muttered, his dark eyes scanning the grim industrial lot across the street. I just need 3. He didn't run toward the school. He bolted in the opposite direction, diving straight into the rusted maze of an abandoned shipping yard. The ambient negative energy here was dense, smelling of rotting fish and old oil. Ren didn't bother masking his presence. He let his footsteps crunch loudly against the gravel, actively drawing attention. A chain-link fence rattled violently to his left. A mass of shifting, tar-like sludge pulled itself over the fence, forming into a crude, canine shape with two mouths. A grade 3, Ren didn't slow down. He drew Nightfall in a single, fluid motion. The dark blade hissed through the cold air. He stepped directly into the creature's path, ducking a snapping jaw, and drove the sword straight up through its center of mass. The curse split in half and dissolved. Target eliminated. Grade 3, milestone progress. 98/100. He kept sprinting. Deeper in the yard, wedged between two rusted shipping containers, a grotesque, multi-limbed curse was gnawing on a stray cat. It looked up, its bulging eyes locking onto him. It shrieked, launching itself forward off the metal walls. Ren pivoted on his heel, swinging Nightfall in a brutal, two-handed horizontal arc. The grade 1 steel effortlessly sheared through the curse's torso midair. It hit the ground in two dissolving pieces. Target eliminated. Grade 3, milestone progress. 99/100. One more, Ren breathed, his boots sliding against the damp gravel as he rounded the final container. A massive shadow fell over him. A bloated, tick-like curse dropped from the top of the container, its heavy, segmented body aiming to crush him flat. Ren didn't step back. He planted his back foot, gripping the hilt with both hands, and thrust the blade straight up. The curse impaled itself entirely on Nightfall. The sheer weight of the monster threatened to buckle Ren's knees, but the heavenly restriction held firm. He twisted the blade sharply and ripped it out through the side of the creature's head. Purple ash rained down over his shoulders. The sharp, incredibly loud chime of the system instantly drowned out the morning traffic. The blue holographic interface exploded into his field of vision, the text glowing brighter than it ever had before. Target eliminated. Grade 3, milestone progress. Exorcise 100 grade 3 curses. 100/100. Achievement unlocked. Executioner's toll. Milestone reward. Plus 10,000 system points. Ren stared at the massive number floating in front of him, his chest heaving as the adrenaline burned through his veins. 10,000. He had roughly 11,000 points total now. Still wasn't 50,000. He still couldn't afford the special grade RCT imbuement. Damn it, Ren hissed, his grip tightening on Nightfall's hilt. It's not enough. Before the words could fully leave his mouth, the blue interface violently flickered. The standard blue border suddenly inverted, glowing a bright, aggressive gold. A rapid succession of new notification chimes hammered against his skull. Hidden condition met. Rapid extermination. Detail. User completed a 100 target elimination milestone in under 12 hours.
Calculating bonus rewards. Reinforce.
The cold morning air seemed to stand completely still as a fresh block of text rapidly scrolled across his vision. Bonus reward 1. Plus 5,000 system points.
Bonus reward 2. Passive trait unlocked. Perception.
Description. Through the relentless, systematic slaughter of spiritual entities, the user's brain has forcibly adapted. The user can now naturally perceive cursed energy, cursed spirits, and residuals without the aid of external curse tools.
Rein blinked.
He slowly let go of Nightfall with his left hand and reached up to his face. He grabbed the wire-rimmed glasses Satoru Gojo had given him, the ones infused with cursed energy so he could see, and pulled them off. He didn't drop them into his dimensional inventory. He just held them in his hand and looked around the abandoned shipping yard. The ugly, purple and black miasma staining the rusted shipping containers where the curses had died was still perfectly visible. The faint, static-like haze of negative energy pooling in the shadows of the alleyway was crisp and clear. "Holy shit," Ren breathed out, his dark eyes wide. "System, show balance," Ren ordered, his voice tight. The interface flickered, updating his totals. Current balance, 16,595 system points. Ren let out a sharp breath. His initial 1,095 points, plus the 500 from the 100 grade 3 kills, combined with the massive 15,000-point bonus drop. 16.5 grand. It was a massive haul for a single night of grinding, but it was still light years away from the 50,000 required to manually imbue his sword with reverse curse technique. "Doesn't matter," Ren muttered, his grip tightening on Nightfall's dark scabbard. "I have the bunker buster." He dismissed the glowing blue screens with a wave of his hand, shoved the now useless wire-rimmed glasses deep into his jacket pocket, and bolted. Ren exploded out of the abandoned shipping yard, his boots tearing across the damp pavement with blinding speed. He bypassed the sidewalks entirely, sticking to the edge of the road and weaving past the early morning commuter traffic. He pulled his phone out mid-sprint, his thumb flying across the screen as he hit redial on Nanami's number. He needed to know exactly how far out the Grade 1 sorcerer was. The call rang once, twice, and then clicked directly to an automated voicemail tone. Ren cursed, shoving the phone back into his pocket. A localized veil was already up. It was actively jamming the cellular signals around the school. "Damn it, I'm late," Ren hissed through his teeth, his pulse hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "I'm already late." If Yuji engaged Mahito alone before Ren arrived, Junpei was a dead man. He rounded a sharp corner onto a wider commercial avenue, scanning the streets for the fastest route to the high school. Half a block down, parked haphazardly in a loading zone with its hazard lights flashing, was a sleek black sedan. It was the exact same make and model as Ajichi's car. Standing by the open driver's side door was a young woman with blonde hair tied back, wearing the standard-issue dark suit of a Jujutsu High assistant director. She was frantically tapping away at a tablet, looking stressed as she scanned the distant skyline. Kari Nitta. Ren didn't slow down. He adjusted his trajectory and sprinted directly toward the vehicle. Nitta looked up just as Ren closed the distance. She jumped, her eyes going wide as a tall, dark-haired teenager rapidly approached her car. "Whoa, hey!" Nitta held up a hand, slipping instantly into crowd control mode. "Civilian, you can't be here. There's a gas leak down the road. You need to clear the area, Sue." Ren didn't stop. He walked right past her outstretched hand, rounding the hood of the sedan. "I'm not a civilian," Ren stated flatly. "I'm Rein, Satoru Gojo's transfer student." Nitta blinked, lowering her tablet slightly. Her professional facade cracked into genuine surprise. "Wait, what? You're the unregistered anomaly guy, Sue? I saw the updated faculty file this morning. But what are you doing out here? You're supposed to be getting a ride," Ren interrupted bluntly. He yanked the passenger door open and slid into the seat. "Get in the car." "Excuse me, Sue." Nitta sputtered, completely thrown off by the absolute lack of respect for the chain of command. Ren leaned over the center console, his dark eyes locking onto hers. Nanami is stuck in a gridlock. Itadori is currently trapped inside an unannounced veil at Satazakura High School with a special grade curse. If we don't get there in the next 3 minutes, students are going to start dying in pieces. Drive. The color instantly drained from Nitta's face. The mention of an unannounced veil and a special grade completely overrode her confusion. Her training kicked in. "Satazakura High," Nitta repeated, her voice dropping its nervous edge. She threw the tablet onto the dashboard and dropped into the driver's seat. "Hold on, Sue." She slammed the door shut, shifted the sedan into drive, and floored the gas pedal. The tires screeched against the asphalt as the car violently launched into the morning traffic, tearing down the avenue toward the high school. The black sedan's tires screeched violently as a Kari Nitto slammed on the brakes, pulling up just outside the gates of Satazakura High School. A massive, semi-translucent black dome engulfed the entire campus. Ren was moving before the car had even completely stopped. He shoved the passenger door open and stepped out onto the pavement.
Rein-kun, Beitsu.
Nita yelled, reaching for her door handle. "Stay out of the veil, Nita," Ren ordered, his voice carrying a sharp, absolute authority that made her freeze in her seat. He didn't look back. "Contact someone. Get a medical team ready on standby." He broke into a dead sprint, plunging straight through the dark, static-like barrier of the veil. The heavy, oppressive pressure of cursed energy washed over him, but Ren ignored it, letting his heavenly restriction propel him forward. His boots tore across the school courtyard, kicking up chunks of grass and dirt as he zeroed in on the open athletic grounds in front of the main building. Just as he cleared the tree line, a massive, deafening shockwave rocked the campus. The center of the courtyard blew outward. For a split second, Ren saw the grotesque black wall of a domain expansion. Giant, pale hands woven together in a sickly dome resting right on the open ground. And then, it completely shattered, disintegrating into the air like broken glass. Sukuna, the king of curses, had just rejected Mahito's soul. Ren skidded to a halt on the torn-up field, the dust and debris raining down around him. Through the settling smoke, the tactical layout of the open area became clear. Nanami and Yuji were standing side by side, both battered, bleeding, and panting heavily, but very much alive. A few dozen yards away, Mahito was staggering backward. The patchwork curse looked horrific, clutching a massive, violently bleeding slash across his right shoulder that Sukuna had just gifted him. Ren's grip tightened around the dark scabbard in his left hand. His mind instantly ran the numbers. The domain is down. He's exhausted and severely wounded, Ren thought, his pulse ticking up with anticipation. If I can just land a clean strike on a special grade right now, the system is absolutely going to trigger a milestone achievement. Ren stepped out through the settling dust, his boots crunching loudly against the cracked pavement and torn earth. "Hey guys," Ren called out, his voice cutting clearly through the heavy silence. "Hope I'm not late." Yuji's head snapped around, his blood-streaked face stretching into pure shock and some holes in his body. "Wait, what are you doing here?" Ren didn't bother answering. He dropped his knees and kicked off the cracked pavement. The sheer explosive force of the heavenly restriction launched him forward like a fired artillery shell. He crossed the distance across the courtyard in a fraction of a second, moving entirely too fast for a normal human. Mahito's mismatched eyes went wide, trying to track the sudden blur of movement. Swing. Nightfall hissed cleanly out of its scabbard. Ren stepped flawlessly inside Mahito's guard, rotated his hips, and drove a brutal, two-handed diagonal slash right across the curse's chest. Mahito instinctively let out a manic grin, instantly manipulating his own soul to reshape the flesh and heal the wound on contact. But the dark steel of Nightfall flared. The blade's innate anti-regeneration field bit viciously into the curse's flesh. The wound hissed and sparked with purple static, completely rejecting the soul manipulation. It refused to knit back together. Mahito's grin shattered. "What?" he shrieked, genuine panic bleeding into his voice as a fresh spray of blood hit the dirt. Mahito stared at his own chest. The wound hissed loudly, purple sparks jumping across the severed flesh. Ren didn't give him a single second to figure it out. He stepped in, his boots digging hard into the torn earth, and swung again. Mahito ducked, throwing a morphed, blade-like arm at Ren's head. Ren pivoted effortlessly, bringing Nightfall around in a tight, brutal arc that sheared the arm clean off. The severed limb hit the ground and immediately began to dissolve. Mahito screamed, manipulating his soul to reshape the shoulder, but the dark energy from the katana actively rejected it. The wound stayed completely open, bleeding profusely. "Yuji! Nanami!" Ren yelled, never breaking his momentum. "Now!" Yuji didn't hesitate. He launched himself forward, his fist glowing with bright blue cursed energy. He slammed a devastating punch directly into Mahito's face. The impact sent the curse stumbling backward, completely throwing off his balance. Nanami was right behind him. His blunt cleaver struck Mahito's leg, the 7-to-3 ratio glowing brightly. A sickening crunch echoed as the joint shattered under the blow. Three of them didn't stop. Ren kept the pressure on with rapid, relentless slashes, cutting off every single angle of escape and leaving jagged, unhealing wounds across the curse's body, though him being speckle grade, so anti-regeneration effect was only 1 to 2 seconds max. Yuji hammered Mahito with raw, heavy punches, while Nanami systematically dismantled whatever limbs the curse tried to use to defend himself. Mahito was getting torn apart. He coughed up a mouthful of dark blood, his mismatched eyes frantic. He knew he was going to die here. With a desperate, high-pitched shriek, Mahito suddenly ballooned his torso, bursting it into a massive, blinding shower of blood and flesh. Ren swung his sword to clear the gore, stepping back to avoid the acidic splatter. By the time his vision cleared a second later, the curse was already moving. Mahito had shrunk down, his body contorting into a small, grotesque shape. He scrambled and slid right through the iron grates of a nearby storm drain. Ren stepped forward, driving Nightfall down into the grate, but it was too late. The curse was already gone. Silence fell over the ruined courtyard. Yuji's knees buckled. He hit the ground hard, gasping for air. His clothes were torn to shreds, and his body was covered in deep puncture wounds and blood. He stared blankly at the storm drain. "He got away," Yuji whispered, his voice cracking with exhaustion and grief. Nanami adjusted his broken glasses, exhaling a long, deeply tired breath. "We survived. That is enough for today." Ren wiped the dark ash off Nightfall and sheathed it. He looked down at the kid, keeping his expression calm. "You did good, Yuji. Come on, let's get you fixed up." Underground Medical Clinic, Jujutsu High. In the far corner of the morgue, Nanami was standing next to a hospital cot. Yuji sat on the edge of it, looking exhausted but completely healed. Nanami was speaking in his usual flat, serious tone, giving the kid a quiet lecture about the heavy reality of being a sorcerer and how saving people wasn't always a clean victory. Yuji just nodded quietly, staring at his hands as he absorbed the lesson. On the other side of the room, Ren was sitting on a metal stool. Shoko was leaning against the stainless steel counter next to him. She had an unlit cigarette resting between her lips, her dark eyes entirely focused on the matte black scabbard of Nightfall resting across Ren's lap. She reached out and lightly tapped the metal handguard. "Wow," Shoko said, her voice dry but laced with genuine, clinical curiosity. "It's a good weapon, a really good weapon, and you just went up against a special grade with it." Ren looked at her. Yeah, it's a good weapon," Ren replied smoothly, leaning back on the stool. He didn't elaborate, didn't explain where the katana came from or any other details. Shoko stared at him for a long moment. She didn't push. She just pulled the unlit cigarette from her lips and let out a soft huff. "You're a weird kid," she murmured, turning around to toss a blood-stained towel into a biohazard bin. "But you kept Kento and the boy alive today, so I don't really care what your secret is." Kept them alive? To be completely honest, he hadn't done a damn thing. He had just arrived late to the massacre, stepping into the aftermath when the worst was already over. If anything, Kento and the kid had survived on their own. But correcting her meant explaining exactly why he had been delayed, and that was a headache he wasn't willing to deal with. She picked up a clipboard from her desk, checking a few notes before glancing back at him over her shoulder. "You should probably get out of here," Shoko advised, pointing her pen toward the heavy metal doors. "Go visit Maki." Rin raised an eyebrow. "Why the rush?" "Because Satoru texted me 10 minutes ago. He will be on his way back from Kyoto soon," Shoko stated flatly. "And once that idiot gets here, he is absolutely not going to give you enough privacy to spend any time together." Ren let out a heavy sigh. He immediately stood up, grabbing his sword. "Thanks for the heads-up, document." Ren stepped out of the subterranean clinic, the heavy metal doors clicking shut behind him. The crisp afternoon air of the mountain campus was a welcome change from the sterile smell of bleach and burnt tobacco. He thought about Shoko's warning. Gojo was on his way back, which meant his window of free time was rapidly closing. He probably should have headed straight for the athletic fields to find Maki, but the burning curiosity in the back of his mind completely overrode the urge. He needed to check the system. Hitting a special grade curse, even a severely wounded one, was completely uncharted territory. Bypassing the main courtyard, Rin took a quiet detour toward the second-year dormitories. The halls were empty. He found his room, stepped inside, and firmly clicked the deadbolt shut. He let out a long breath, tossing Nightfall's dark scabbard onto the twin mattress before dropping down next to it. "System," Rin muttered into the quiet room. The air in front of him shimmered. The familiar, translucent blue interface materialized, its crisp light casting a faint glow over the cramped dorm room. Rin didn't even look at the notification log first. His eyes flicked straight to the top right corner of the screen to check his total balance. His heart literally skipped a beat. He leaned forward, squinting at the glowing numbers just to make sure his exhaustion wasn't making him hallucinate. Current balance, 41,595 system points. "Holy shit," Rin breathed out, his pulse suddenly hammering against his ribs. Over 40,000. He had barely scraped together 16 grand after grinding all night in Kawasaki. He quickly swiped his hand through the air, pulling up the unread notification log to see exactly what had triggered the massive payout. Bright, aggressive gold text block expanded in the center of his vision. Achievement unlocked. Dominate against a special grade. System note. It does not matter if the target was already severely wounded and exhausted, or if the user utilized multiple helpers. A special grade is a special grade. Run let out a short, disbelieving laugh at the system's blunt clarification. He kept reading, his eyes dropping to the specific reward breakdown beneath the note. Reward 1. Plus 25,000 system points.
Raten noted.
That explained the massive jump in his balance. But it was the second line of text that made his breath completely die in his throat. Reward 2. Passive trait unlocked. Soul immunity. Description. The user's soul is now strictly bounded. It is entirely immune to foreign manipulation, transfiguration, or forced extraction. Ren stared at the blue screen. The ambient noise of the wind outside his dorm window faded entirely. His brain completely stalled out as he processed the sheer, game-breaking weight of that single sentence. Mahito's entire terrifying gimmick, the ability to instantly disfigure or kill anyone with a single touch, was now completely, fundamentally useless against him. He was a direct, absolute hard counter to one of the most dangerous curses on the planet. Ren slowly lowered his hands, dragging his palms down his face. He stared back at the floating blue screen, a deeply bewildered expression resting on his features. "What the hell?" he whispered to the empty room. Ren stared at the blue panel hovering in the dim light of his dorm room. He reached out, his hand passing harmlessly through the holographic text detailing his new soul immunity trait. It wasn't a glitch. The system had genuinely recognized his brief, opportunistic strike on Mahito as dominating a special grade. He dropped his hand, letting out a sharp exhale. Mahito was the one wild card in the upcoming Shibuya timeline that he hadn't fully figured out how to counter. The curse's ability to instantly kill or disfigure with a single touch was a nightmare for a close-quarters fighter like him. Now, that threat was completely, fundamentally neutralized. "Okay, focus," Rin muttered, shaking his head to clear the shock. He looked back up at the balance tracker. 41,595 system points. It was a massive leap from the roughly 16 grand he had scraped together hunting in Kawasaki earlier that morning. His mind immediately ran the math. He needed exactly 50,000 points to upgrade his tool to a special grade, plus who knows how much extra to imbue it with reverse curse technique. He was only 8,500 points short. He dismissed the interface with a quick swipe of his hand. The blue light vanished, plunging the room back into natural afternoon shadows. Sitting around calculating point deficits wasn't going to bridge the gap. More importantly, Shoko had explicitly warned him that Gojo was on his way back from Kyoto. If he wanted to see Maki before the world's most annoying teacher returned to crash the party, he had to move right now. Run pushed off the mattress, grabbing Nightfall's dark scabbard and securing it back in the system inventory. He unlocked the deadbolt and slipped out into the empty hallway of the second-year dormitories. The walk to the athletic fields was quiet. The adrenaline from the chaotic fight with Mahito was finally bleeding out of his system, replaced by the terrifyingly efficient physical recovery rate of his heavenly restriction. His muscles felt perfectly loose, the heavy fatigue completely gone. As he crested the small stone path overlooking the main training grounds, he spotted her. Maki was still running drills. She had swapped the wooden naginata for a solid steel training staff, her movements a violent, perfectly calculated blur. Handa and Toge were nowhere to be seen. Rin didn't call out right away. He just leaned against the chain-link fence, watching her pivot and strike the air with lethal precision. Even completely exhausted, there was a sharp, undeniable elegance to the way her body moved. She finished a brutal combination with a heavy downward strike, the steel staff stopping mere inches from the dirt. She held the stance for a second, her shoulders rising and falling with heavy breaths, before slowly standing up straight. "Stop staring," Maki called out, not even turning around. Rin smiled, pushing off the fence and walking onto the dirt field. "Can you blame me?" Maki finally turned, resting the heavy staff against her shoulder. Her face was flushed from the intense workout, but her sharp, wire-rimmed glasses caught the afternoon sun. She tried to maintain her usual fierce scowl, but the corners of her mouth twitched slightly. "You took your time getting back," she noted, her tone attempting to sound completely casual. "Nanami didn't run you into the ground?" "Nanami is a saint compared to your teacher," Ren replied smoothly, closing the distance between them. "He actually respects standard working hours." Maki let out a short, genuine laugh, shaking her head. "I told you he was the only functional adult we have on staff." She looked him up and down, her sharp eyes scanning for any hidden injuries or signs of blood. "You're sure you're okay?" "I'm completely fine," Rin promised, stopping just a foot away from her. He kept his voice low, the teasing edge dropping into something much more sincere. "I actually just came to collect on a promise." Maki blinked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What promise?" Rin smiled, reaching out to gently tug a loose strand of dark green hair behind her ear. "You left me a voice note saying you were going to exorcise my ghost if I died today. Since I survived the assignment, I figured I earned a proper welcome back." "I didn't say anything like that," Maki shot back instantly. She leaned her weight against the steel staff, crossing her free arm over her chest with a dismissive scoff. Ren tilted his head. A slow, dangerously amused smirk spread across his face as he reached into his jacket pocket. "Are you sure? Because I have it saved. The audio quality is surprisingly crisp. Let me just pull it up." "Whatever, idiot. You're just making things." Maki stopped. Her brain finally caught up to the timeline of last night. The bathroom mirror. The oversized black t-shirt slipping off her bare shoulder. The visible mark on her neck. The furiously defensive voice note she had recorded immediately after hitting send. The absolute, ironclad confidence completely vanished from her posture. A brilliant, violent shade of red instantly flooded her cheeks, sweeping down her neck and lighting up the tips of her ears. "Wait," Maki choked out, her voice suddenly losing all its lethal bite. She took a quick half-step forward, pointing an accusing, slightly trembling finger at his pocket. Do not take your phone out." Ren let out a low laugh, leaving his hand in his pocket but taking a step closer. "So you do remember. I was starting to think I hallucinated it. Though, honestly, I've looked at it about 20 times today, so I'm pretty sure it's real." "Shut up," Maki hissed. She cast a frantic, panicked glance around the empty dirt field, as if Panda or Toad might magically emerge from the tree line just to eavesdrop. "I told you never to bring that up again. I only sent it so you would finally go to sleep. And I appreciate the effort," Rin said smoothly, closing the last bit of distance between them. He reached out, his hand settling comfortably on her waist. "It was very motivating. Kept me completely focused." Maki groaned, squeezing her eyes shut. She aggressively dropped her forehead against his shoulder to hide her burning face. She didn't push him away, though her free hand reached up to grip the front of his jacket tightly. "I actually hate you," he muttered into the fabric. "No, you don't," Rin murmured, wrapping both arms around her. He rested his chin on top of her head, entirely ignoring the heavy steel staff awkwardly wedged between them. "So, about that welcome back?" Rin slowly lifted his chin from the top of her head. He pulled back just an inch, enough to break the tight embrace but keep her locked securely in his space. Maki's hands were still tightly gripping the front of his jacket. As he stepped back, she finally raised her head, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Her face was flushed a brilliant, burning crimson. Rin didn't say another word. The teasing smirk on his face melted away into something quiet and entirely sincere. His dark eyes searched hers, heavy and warm in the quiet afternoon air. For a second, Maki looked like she was trying to summon up one last defense, her jaw tensing on pure instinct. But under his steady, patient gaze, the fight simply drained out of her shoulders. She let out a soft, shaky breath. Slowly, she allowed her eyelids to flutter shut, her dark lashes resting against her warm cheeks. A faint, betraying tremor touched her lower lip as she tilted her face up just a fraction. Ren understood exactly what she was asking for. He let go of her waist, bringing his hand up to gently cup the side of her face, his thumb brushing over her burning cheek. He leaned down and pressed his lips softly against hers. As his lips met hers, the last stubborn knot of tension in Maki's shoulders completely dissolved. The grip she had on his jacket slowly unspooled, the crumpled denim slipping through her fingers. Instead of dropping her arms or crossing them defensively, she brought her hands up. Her palms slid smoothly over his chest, finding the collar of his jacket and moving up to his neck. Her hands, rough and heavily calloused from years of swinging wooden naginatas and steel staffs, settled gently against the sides of his jaw. She tilted her head, naturally adjusting the angle as she leaned fully into his space, parting her lips just enough to let the kiss deepen. It wasn't rushed, and it lacked the frantic, consuming heat of their time in the apartment. It was just slow, warm, and entirely grounding. Ren kept his hand softly cupped against her face, his thumb tracing a lazy arc over her cheekbone, anchoring her there in the quiet of the empty dirt field. When they finally broke apart, it was only by a fraction of an inch. Maki didn't immediately open her eyes. She kept her hands resting warmly against his jaw, her chest rising and falling in a slow, steady breath as the cool afternoon breeze swept past them. Maki's eyes suddenly snapped open. The quiet, grounding bubble they had just built popped the second the bright afternoon sun and the complete lack of cover finally registered in her brain. She let out a sharp breath, her hands pressing firmly against his chest to push him away. She took a deliberate step back, instantly crossing her arms over her chest as her posture snapped back into rigid, defensive lines. "What the hell are we doing?" she muttered, her amber eyes immediately darting toward the tree line and the dorm roofs, scanning for any sign of an audience. Her face was still burning a deep red, but her tone was sharp, trying desperately to rebuild her usual unbothered edge. "We are in the middle of the open training field." Ren let his hands fall back to his sides. The quiet sincerity on his face shifted back into a slow, highly amused smile. "Hissing? In plain sight, idiot." Maki shot back, glaring at him. Anyone could walk by. Satoru could literally drop out of the sky right now. She pinched the bridge of her nose, letting out a heavy, frustrated sigh. "You're the one who is supposed to be laying low. And I'm supposed to actually have some situational awareness. Why didn't you stop me? You should have pushed me away." "Maki, you grabbed my jacket and looked at me," Ren pointed out simply, keeping his tone entirely reasonable. "I am biologically incapable of stopping you when you do that." "Shut up," she grumbled, dropping her hand. She adamantly refused to acknowledge the compliment, though the flush on her ears stubbornly remained. She aggressively adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, forcing her shoulders to set back into their usual uncompromising stance. "I'm getting stupid around you. My awareness just completely zeroes out. If Panda saw that, I'd never hear the end of it." Run let out a soft laugh, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Hey, your awareness is fine. I checked the perimeter before I walked out here. We're completely alone." "That is not the point," Maki stated firmly, though the lethal bite was mostly gone from her voice. She leveled a stern, warning look at him. "We are not doing that again. Not outside. Not where anyone can see." "Understood." Ren nodded smoothly, thoroughly enjoying the stern directive. "So strictly indoors. My room or yours?" "Absolutely not." Maki shot back instantly, her voice dropping into a harsh, urgent whisper. "Neither." Ren raised an eyebrow, keeping his hands casually tucked in his pockets. "Neither? Boss, you're giving me mixed signals here. You just said strictly indoors." "I meant indoors outside of Jujutsu High, idiot," Maki clarified, glaring at him as if he had just suggested they juggle live grenades. She aggressively gestured toward the second-year dormitories visible just above the tree line. "My room is a no. Nobara is literally right down the hall, and she completely lacks the basic human concept of knocking. If she walks in on us and we are without clothes, then..." "Fair point," Rin conceded smoothly. "Kujisaki is definitely a threat. But what about my room?" Maki looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Are you actually joking? Satoru is your homeroom teacher. The man has absolutely zero boundaries and can literally teleport into a room whenever he feels like it. You really want to roll the dice on him suddenly popping into your dorm to ask you what your favorite flavor of matcha is?" Ren actually grimaced at the thought. The mental image of Satoru Gojo suddenly materializing in his bedroom while he was with Maki was enough to instantly kill any romantic tension. Considering Gojo was the ultimate troll who had already fake-guessed their relationship status just to watch Maki squirm, it was a completely valid fear. "Okay, yeah. Point taken," Rin muttered, a genuine shudder running down his spine. Exactly, Maki said, letting out a sharp breath as she picked up her heavy steel training staff from the dirt. This entire campus is compromised. Between Panda constantly snooping around and Satoru treating the school like his personal playground, there is zero privacy here. If we are doing anything, she paused, her cheeks stubbornly flashing pink again, it is strictly off campus. So, Ren said, his voice softening back into that warm, low register. What you're saying is we need to schedule another shopping trip down in Shibuya soon. Head back to my apartment?
Oi.
Maki. The loud, booming voice echoed across the open dirt field, completely shattering the quiet afternoon air. Heavy, rhythmic footsteps crunched against the gravel path leading down from the dormitories. Maki's reaction was instantaneous. Her brain completely overrode her embarrassment in a fraction of a second. She took a sharp step back, putting exactly 3 feet of socially acceptable distance between them. The steel staff, which had been resting awkwardly between them, was suddenly twirled up and slammed base first into the dirt, anchoring her into a flawless, strictly professional stance. The violent flush on her face didn't entirely vanish, but her expression instantly hardened back into her signature, uncompromising scowl. Run just naturally turned his head, pulling one hand out of his pocket to give a casual, friendly wave. A massive, black and white bear came jogging down the path, followed closely by Toge Inumaki, whose face was buried in his high collar. Hey, Panda, Rin greeted easily, leaning back slightly. Inumaki, good afternoon. Kelp, Toge acknowledged with a small nod. Panda stopped a few feet away, his beady eyes shifting from Maki's rigid posture to Ren's entirely relaxed demeanor. If he suspected anything, he didn't show it. Instead, the cursed corpse crossed his thick, furry arms. Good, you're both here, Panda said, though his focus quickly zeroed in on Ren. Actually, transfer student, I have a question for you. What exactly is your deal with Nobara? Ren blinked, genuinely momentarily caught off guard. Kujisaki? What do you mean? Maki didn't move her head, but her amber eyes flicked to Ron. Whenever we mention your name around her, she acts completely different, Panda explained, scratching his chin. Usually she's loud and aggressive, but if Fushiguro or I bring you up, she gets all defensive and weird. Did you do something? Ren kept his expression perfectly neutral. He gave a mild, unbothered shrug. I honestly have no idea. I don't really know what goes on in her head. She's pretty unpredictable. Tuna, Toge agreed, pointing a finger at Ren as if confirming Nobara's chaotic nature. Panda sighed, dropping his arms. Well, whatever. Just thought I'd ask. Anyway, Maki, we're heading back to the dorms. Don't forget Satoru is returning tomorrow. He's definitely going to want to see the Goodwill event training logs the second he gets back. I know, Maki replied flatly, her tone strictly professional. I'll have them ready. Salmon, Toge said, giving a small wave before the two of them turned and continued down the dirt path toward the main campus buildings. Run and Maki stood in complete silence until the crunch of gravel faded entirely and they were alone again. Maki let out a heavy breath, her rigid posture finally dropping. She planted the base of her staff in the dirt and turned fully toward Rin, resting her hands on her hips. All right, Maki demanded, her voice flat. What's with Nobara? Rin couldn't help the small, amused smile that broke across his face. Are you interrogating me, boss? I'm asking why my junior acts like an idiot whenever you're mentioned, Maki countered, entirely unamused.
Spill.
It's really nothing, Rin chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. She came into the vintage streetwear boutique where I work. I sold her a crimson cropped jacket, and she tried to smoothly ask for my number under the excuse of needing fashion advice. Obviously, I didn't give it to her, Ren continued, waving a hand dismissively. I just handed her a generic store business card and played dumb. I'm pretty sure she's been actively holding a grudge against me ever since. Maki didn't look angry. Instead, she let out a long, deeply tired sigh, pinching the bridge of her nose. Of course she is, Maki muttered, shaking her head. There was no venom or jealousy in her voice, just a heavy, exasperated understanding. She was already entirely used to high school girls staring at him and throwing themselves at him on a daily basis. Women know women, Ren. Nobara has an ego the size of Tokyo. She thinks she just got smoothly rejected by some random civilian retail worker. Her pride is probably in absolute shreds right now. Ren tilted his head, a faint, amused smile on his lips. So, I'm the bad guy for turning down your junior? I didn't say that, Maki shot back, though the corners of her mouth twitched. She leaned her weight back onto her steel staff. It's not surprising. With that stupid face of yours, it's honestly a miracle she didn't just threaten you with a hammer to get it. Maki looked away, her amber eyes tracking the distant tree line. A brief flash of genuine frustration crossed her features. And it's not like she knows you're, taken. She said the word quietly, a faint dusting of pink returning to her cheeks. She gripped the steel staff a little tighter. She doesn't know about us. And because we have to keep everything a secret, it's not like I can just march into the first-year dorms and tell her to back off her upperclassman's boyfriend. Ren's expression softened completely. He stepped back into her space, entirely unbothered by the open field. Hey, it doesn't matter what she knows or doesn't know. I handled it. Maki looked back at him, her sharp gaze softening just a fraction. Besides, Ren added smoothly, his teasing tone slipping right back into place. If she ever tries again, I'll just tell her my terrifying, Naginata-wielding boss will break every single bone in my body if I give out my number. Maki let out a short, genuine laugh, the last bit of tension finally bleeding out of her shoulders. Damn right I would. The sun was fully beginning to set by the time they left the dirt training field behind, casting long, fading orange shadows across the campus stones. They walked back toward the second-year dormitories together. The halls were completely empty. Without the immediate threat of Panda popping out from behind a corner or Satoru Gojo teleporting into their airspace, the rigid, professional distance Maki usually maintained naturally evaporated. They walked side by side down the quiet corridor, moving so close that their shoulders practically brushed with every step. The heavy, calloused warmth of her hand occasionally bumped against his knuckles. She didn't pull away. Ren was entirely focused on the comfortable silence, perfectly content to just match her steady pace. He was so distracted by the quiet intimacy of the moment that he didn't even notice the brass number plate on the door to his left. He just kept walking. Maki, however, stopped dead in her tracks. She let out a short, exasperated sigh, planting the base of her steel staff against the floorboards. Where exactly are you going? Maki asked, her voice dry. Ren paused, taking a half step back and blinking at her. What do you mean? Maki just raised an eyebrow, reaching out to tap the metal frame of the door he had just strolled past. Your room. You just walked right past it. Ren looked at the door, then back to Maki. The realization hit him, and that slow, notoriously dangerous smirk immediately crept back onto his face. Oh, don't owe me, Maki grumbled, rolling her eyes, though a faint dusting of pink returned to her cheeks. Go to sleep. You've got Satoru to deal with tomorrow, and I have to finish these stupid Goodwill logs. Right? Sleep. Ren agreed smoothly. Instead of turning the doorknob, he stepped right back into her personal space. He leaned in close, his chest almost brushing hers. Maki's breath hitched, her amber eyes widening slightly behind her wire-rimmed glasses as she instinctively braced for a kiss. Instead, Ren quickly shifted his weight, His hand dropped, delivering a swift, sharp, and entirely playful smack right to her rear. Maki jumped, a startled, completely untactical squeak leaving her lips. Before her combat reflexes could even begin to process the absolute audacity of the strike, Ren was already moving. Relying entirely on his Zenin footwork, he spun on his heel, yanked his door open, and darted inside. "Good night, boss," he called out cheerfully. Click, the deadbolt slid shut. Out in the empty hallway, Maki stood completely frozen. The cool evening air of the dorms entirely failed to combat the violent, burning heat rapidly taking over her face. She stared at the closed wooden door, her brain misfiring as the sheer embarrassment and shock caught up to her. Slowly, she brought her free hand up, pressing her fingers hard against her forehead to stave off the incoming migraine. "Idiot," Maki muttered to the empty corridor, her voice trembling slightly between absolute fury and undeniable affection. Maki lowered her hand from her forehead, her amber eyes immediately darting up and down the length of the corridor. There was no one. The hallway was completely dead and quiet. She let out a shaky breath that was half frustration and half relief, her grip tightening around her steel training staff. The absolute audacity of that idiot. She wanted to march right back to his door, kick it off its hinges and run him through, but the stubborn, burning heat on her cheeks completely betrayed her lethal intentions. "Unbelievable," Maki muttered to herself, shaking her head. She turned on her heel and marched down the hall toward her own room. She didn't look back, pushing her door open and stepping inside before firmly clicking her own deadbolt shut to hide away from the rest of the world. Next morning, Gojo returned from Kyoto with 0 useful intel and 3 boxes of overpriced mochi. The campus instantly went back to its usual loud routine, and from then 3 weeks passed. The Goodwill event was just 3 days away. Maki practically lived on the training field, running drills until the sun went down. To keep Ren out of her way and maintain his cover, Gojo threw him into low-level sweeps with the first years. Today, it was just him and Nobara. Shinjuku, an empty concrete parking garage. Ren flicked his katana to the side. The dark blade shed a line of thick purple blood. The grade 3 curse slumped against a concrete pillar and dissolved into ash. Ren sheathed Nightfall with a sharp click. "Clear," Ren said, putting his phone in his pocket. "Let's head back." Across the garage, Nobara pulled her hammer back. A cursed nail popped out of the wall and flew into her pouch. She didn't move toward the exit. She just stood there, staring hard at a crack in the concrete floor. She kicked a loose piece of gravel.
I'm sorry.
Her voice was fast, mumbled, and aimed directly at her boots. Ren stopped walking. He turned around. The quiet in the garage stretched out. Car hunked down on the street below. "What?" Ren asked. He legitimately thought he misheard her. Her head snapped up. Her face was bright red, her eyes burning with defensive anger. "Don't make me repeat it. I said I'm sorry. For the store. And for hitting you in the back last month." Ren just blinked. His brain completely stalled. He knew exactly who Nobara Kujisaki was. Her pride was massive. Apologizing was fundamentally against her nature. "You're actually apologizing to me?" Ren said slowly. "Yes," she yelled, throwing her free hand up in frustration. "God, you're making this worse. Fushiguro told me I was acting like a brat. And maybe my pride got bruised about the boutique thing. Whatever. You pulled your weight today. You aren't completely useless." She quickly snatched her nail pouch, aggressively adjusted her uniform jacket, and stomped past him toward the stairwell. She completely refused to make eye contact. "We're even now," she yelled over her shoulder, her boots echoing loudly down the concrete stairs. "If you tell anyone about this, I will literally fill your mattress with nails." Ren stood alone in the empty garage. A slow, Genuinely shocked smile broke across his face. He shook his head, adjusted his jacket, and followed her out. Ren caught the heavy metal stairwell door right before it slammed shut. He jogged down a few steps, easily matching Nobara's aggressive, stomping pace. "So," Ren said, keeping his tone completely casual, "are we friends now?" Nobara stopped dead on the concrete stairs. She whipped around, her grip tightening on her hammer. "Do you actually want to die?" "Just asking," Ren smiled, leaning against the railing. "You apologized. So we're even. Sounds like friendship to me. We are co-workers." "Barely," Nobara snapped. Her face was still slightly pink. She turned back around and marched down the steps. "Do not push it, transfer student." Ren chuckled and followed her out of the stairwell into the bright Shinjuku sunlight. He adjusted Nightfall's scabbard on his back as they walked toward the station. Honestly, he had spent the last 3 weeks waiting for a massive interrogation about the weapon. A random guy suddenly carrying a top-tier grade 1 cursed weapon was a giant red flag. But the interrogation never happened. Gojo had looked at the black blade exactly once. He just smiled and didn't ask a single question. To the strongest sorcerer in the world, a grade 1 sword was basically a butter knife. It didn't threaten him. Maki hadn't asked about it either. She just eyed the craftsmanship and probably assumed Gojo bought it for him to keep him alive. Ren squinted against the afternoon sun. He wasn't wearing the thick, wire-rimmed glasses Gojo had given him. He had handled that problem himself 2 weeks ago. He knew Gojo would eventually catch him fighting without the glasses. The six eyes saw everything. So, Ren took control of the narrative. He walked right up to Gojo in the courtyard and handed the glasses back. "I don't need these anymore. I can just see them now." Gojo had actually been shocked. He pulled down his blindfold and stared at Ren for a full, uncomfortable minute. The six eyes scanned him up and down. Ren's cursed energy hadn't changed. It was still practically zero. By all laws of jujitsu, Ren should be completely blind to spirits. It made absolutely zero mechanical sense. But Ren knew how Gojo's brain worked. Gojo hated boring things.
À random, impossible mutation?
That was highly entertaining. Gojo just laughed, pocketed the glasses, and called it a miracle of youth. It was a calculated risk, but it worked perfectly. "Hey, are you coming or are you just going to stand there?" Ren blinked, snapping back to reality. Nobara was standing 10 feet ahead, tapping her foot impatiently on the pavement. "Yeah, coming," Ren called out, jogging up to catch her. "You're paying for my train ticket," she muttered, crossing her arms and looking away. "Consider it compensation for me having to tolerate you today." "Sure thing, bestie," Ren teased. Nobara let out an angry, frustrated groan, but she didn't hit him. The train car rattled as it pulled away from Shinjuku Station. Ren sat on the plush green bench seat, watching the city blur past the window. Nobara slumped in the seat right next to him. She had her arms crossed, glaring at her phone screen as she aggressively scrolled through social media. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. Ren pulled it out. The caller ID flashed a number he had saved a few weeks ago. Yuji. Ren froze for a split second. He glanced sideways at Nobara. Yuji was still legally dead. Gojo's grand reveal for the Goodwill event was only 3 days away. If Ren dropped the kid's name right now, Nobara would instantly interrogate him, break his phone, and probably try to kill Gojo. He swiped the green icon and brought the phone to his ear.
Hey, ren ansatsmulig.
Ren. Nanami is making me read books on cursed energy history. My brain is literally melting. Yuji's loud, energetic voice leaked slightly through the speaker. Ren shifted in his seat, slightly tilting the phone away from Nobara. "Is that right? Golden Retriever?" Nobara stopped scrolling. Her thumb hovered over her screen. She slowly turned her head and gave him a highly judgmental sideways look. "Golden Retriever?" Yuji asked on the other end, sounding completely confused. Wait, who? Yeah, man. Sounds rough. Rin cut in effortlessly, keeping his tone light and casual. Look, I'm on the train right now, going through a tunnel soon. I'll catch up with you later. Oh, right. My bad. See you later. Yuji hung up. Rin slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked straight ahead. The silence stretched for 3 seconds. Golden retriever? Nobara asked, her voice dripping with absolute disgust. Who the hell calls their friend that? Just a guy from my old high school. Rin lied without missing a beat. He leaned back against the window. He has a lot of energy. Not very bright, but he means well. Nobara scoffed, turning her attention back to her phone screen. Sounds annoying. You attract weirdos. Rin just smiled, watching the afternoon sun reflect off the train window. You have no idea. Rin turned his head back toward the window, watching the city buildings blur past in the afternoon sun. He rested his chin on his knuckles. His mind immediately went back to the math. He currently had 41,595 system points. He was barely 8,500 points away from the 50,000 required to upgrade Nightfall to a special grade weapon. If he actually managed to pay the premium cost to manually imbue the blade with reverse curse technique, a slow smirk crept onto his face. A guy with 0 cursed energy swinging an RCT-infused sword. He would basically be a mini Maharaja. He could just walk right through domains and melt disaster curses just by swinging a piece of metal. But a weapon was still just a weapon. He knew his ceiling was too low without cursed energy. Rin thought about Megumi. The guy could literally summon electric birds and giant black hounds out of shadows. It was an incredibly versatile, top-tier technique. Rin let out a quiet, heavy sigh through his nose. Honestly, he thought, if Fushiguro had been born a woman, I definitely would have had to think about it. Stop smiling at the window, Nobara snapped from the seat next to him. You look like a serial killer. Rin blinked, snapping out of his thoughts. His smirk dropped into a casual, unbothered expression. Just thinking about a friend. He lied smoothly. Between the golden retriever and whatever you're smiling at now, your friends sound like freaks, Nobara muttered, aggressively tapping her phone screen. Rin just chuckled, leaning back into his seat. Rin watched the buildings pass outside the train window. He opened his system interface. Current balance: 41,595 system points. The number annoyed him. 3 weeks of daily sweeps with Megumi and Nobara, and the balance barely moved. Satoru kept throwing them grade 3 and grade 4 curses. Each grade 3 only gave him 5 points. It was pocket change. He hadn't triggered a single new achievement.
No bonuses. No hidden drops.
Back in Kawasaki, he hit the 100 kill milestone and got a massive payout. The next milestone was probably 500 or 1,000 kills. At his current pace, that would take years. The system clearly didn't care about him grinding weak trash mobs. It rewarded risk. Jumping a special grade like Mahito dropped 25,000 points in his lap. Beating up weak curses in empty parking garages gave him nothing. Rin swiped the blue screen away. The Goodwill event started in 3 days. The Kyoto students were arriving. More importantly, he knew the disaster curses were going to crash the event. Hanami, Juzo, the bald guy with the hand sword, that was his gold mine. He tapped his knuckles against the windowsill, running the possibilities in his head. What was the next achievement? Defeat a jujitsu sorcerer? Kill a special grade? Survive a domain expansion? Stop tapping the glass? Nobara muttered, crossing her arms tighter. You're giving me a headache. My bad, Rin said, dropping his hand. The heavy metal doors of the morgue clicked shut. Normally, the subterranean room smelled strictly of industrial bleach and burnt tobacco. Today, it smelled like freshly roasted coffee beans. Ren slouched in a rickety metal folding chair across from the desk. His phone vibrated on his knee. The screen lit up with a new message from Maki, get to the field.
50 laps.
Now, Ren stared at the text for a second, swiped the notification away, and locked the screen. Training is so boring, Ren muttered, tilting his head back to look at the ceiling. Across the room, Shoko Yeri sat at her desk. Her feet were propped up on the edge of a metal filing cabinet, right next to a mountain of paperwork. She didn't look up from the medical chart in her lap. She just lifted a ceramic mug to her lips and took a slow, deep sip. 3 weeks ago, the corner of the room behind her was just an empty stainless steel counter. Now, a high-end espresso machine, a burr grinder, and a compact mini-fridge sat neatly next to the biohazard bins. When Ren first hauled the boxes down the mountain path, Shoko had threatened to lock the doors. She bluntly reminded him that she ran a sterile medical facility, not a cafe. But then Ren handed her the first cup of perfectly brewed dark roast. She drank it, set the cup down, and never complained about the machine again. Shoko lowered her mug. Her brown eyes, framed by deep, chronic dark circles, flicked over to Ren. If you keep hiding down here, Maki is going to break my door off its hinges, Shoko said. Her voice was dry and completely devoid of inflection. He won't, Ren said easily. He stood up and walked over to the stainless steel counter. He pulled a fresh bag of beans from the cabinet. She hates the smell of this room. It's the perfect bunker. Shoko pulled an unlit cigarette from her lab coat pocket and rested it between her lips. You're using my morgue to dodge your girlfriend's conditioning drills. I'm providing essential medical support, Ren corrected. He poured the beans into the grinder and flipped the switch. The loud, grinding mechanical noise briefly drowned out the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. You need real caffeine to function. I need a place to sit where nobody swings a wooden pole at my head. The grinder clicked off. Ren tapped the dark grounds into the portafilter and locked it into the machine. Shoko watched him work for a long second. She let out a soft huff, her expression completely unimpressed. Make me another one, Shoko ordered flatly. Ren smirked, pulling a clean mug from the rack. See? Essential support. 3 days later, the Goodwill event. The afternoon sun beat down on the courtyard, radiating heat off the stone steps. Nobara's boot tapped a rapid, impatient beat against the concrete, her arms folded tight across her chest. Megumi stood beside her, staring a hole into the empty air. Behind them, Maki leaned her weight on her wooden polearm, flanked by Panda and Toj. Footsteps crunched over the gravel. Yudaheim led the Kyoto students up the path, with To-Do, Mai, Miwa, Mekamaru, Momo, and Kamo forming a loose, unenthusiastic line a few feet away. Where are the souvenirs? Nobara asked, her voice sharp enough to make Momo flinch. Yudaheim rubbed her temples. Where is that idiot? Sorry I'm late. The squeak of rubber wheels cut through the tension. Gojo strolled into the clearing, casually pushing a metal utility cart carrying a massive pink box. He tossed small protective charms to the thoroughly unimpressed Kyoto students, then clapped his hands and spun toward his own class. And for the Tokyo team, a special surprise. The lid flew off. Yuji burst out of the box, throwing both hands in the air. A poppy! He flashed a massive, goofy grin. Nobody moved. Nobody made a sound. Yudaheim frowned. The Kyoto students just looked at each other in confusion. All the color drained from Megumi's face. Nobara's jaw dropped before her features hardened into something lethal. Ren kept his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Yuji's smile started to slip. He slowly lowered his arms, his eyes darting between Megumi and Nobara before finally locking onto the transfer student. Leighton? Yuji asked, a bead of sweat rolling down his cheek. You didn't tell them? Nobara slowly turned her head. A vein pulsed visibly at her temple. You knew. Ren didn't blink. He met her glare with a perfectly deadpan expression. I have no idea who this kid is. Hey! Yuji protested from inside the box. Nobara ignored him. She crossed the distance in 3 strides and drove her heavy combat boot hard into the pink cardboard. The metal cart rattled violently from the impact. Explain. Now, she said. Megumi stepped up right beside her, fixing Yuji with a dark, completely silent glare. It creaked in Maki's hands as her grip tightened on her polearm, though her amber eyes bypassed the box entirely to zero in on their teacher. Gojo just laughed, completely immune to the killing intent radiating off his students. See? Great surprise. Mai's hand rested on her hip, her glare fixed on her twin standing rigid on the stone steps. But then, her gaze snagged on the space just an inch to Maki's right. A guy stood there, dark hair, sharp jaw, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. He was perfectly still, quietly watching the Tokyo team implode. Mai's breath caught in her throat. A sudden, violent heat rushed up her neck, setting her cheeks on fire. Her heart hammered against her ribs, frantic and loud. It wasn't just a blush. It felt like walking face first into a physical shockwave. Her fingers clamped down around the leather holster of her revolver. The leather groaned under her grip. She gritted her teeth, her breaths coming short and fast. Her instincts flared, defensive and sharp, yet her stomach churned with a heavy, twisting warmth. It was a cloying, invasive sense of absolute safety, of deep, unnatural comfort. What is wrong with me? She didn't even know his name. Mai forced her fingers to loosen. She stared hard at the stone steps, fighting the sudden flush burning her face. Yudaheim rubbed her temples. The stupid surprise box stunt was already giving her a headache. She scanned the Tokyo lineup to count their numbers and stopped. Her eyes locked onto the tall guy standing quietly next to Maki. Satoru, Yudaheim snapped. She pointed directly at Ren. Who is that? He isn't on the official roster. Gojo clapped his hands together. He spun around, completely ignoring Nobara violently shaking Yuji by the collar. Oh, where are my manners? Gojo beamed. He walked over and threw a heavy arm around Ren's shoulders. Ren just kept his hands shoved in his pockets.
Kyoto, Mitreten-kun.
Our brand new transfer student. Yudaheim crossed her arms. Her eyes narrowed into a glare. A transfer student, 3 days before the event. From where? Antarctica, Gojo answered instantly. Silence dropped over the courtyard. It's true, Gojo nodded. He pulled his blindfold up just enough to wink. He transferred from the secret South Pole facility. Fought off an entire colony of special-grade Emperor Penguin curses. Very dangerous stuff. The frostbite alone is brutal. Tragic backstory. A vein popped on Yudaheim's forehead. Her face turned red. There is no jujitsu branch in Antarctica, you moron. You've never been there, Yudaheim. You don't know, Gojo countered smoothly. I know we don't fight penguins. Stop making things up, she yelled, stepping forward. Ren looked at Yudaheim. His expression stayed completely flat. It was mostly ice, really cold. Nobara stopped strangling Yuji. She turned and glared at Ren. Do not encourage him. Maki let out a long, tired sigh. She rested her forehead against her wooden polearm and shook her head. After the initial chaos finally died down, the rest of the morning proceeded exactly as expected. Principal Gakuganji arrived on the scene shortly after. The old man hobbled up the stone steps with his wooden cane, fully prepared to give a boring, traditional speech to officially kick off the event. Instead, he stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes bulged out of his wrinkled face, staring in absolute, horrified shock at Yuji Itadori. The kid he had personally arranged to be assassinated was standing right there, alive, completely healthy, and smiling like an idiot, while Gakuganji was busy having a silent, internal aneurysm over Sukuna's vessel. His furious gaze swept over the rest of the Tokyo lineup. He didn't pause. His eyes passed right over the new transfer student without registering him at all. He completely ignored him. Ren raised a slight eyebrow, keeping his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. Did he actually just not notice me? Ren thought. He mentally checked his system interface. His innate charm trait was definitely still active. It had practically flashbanged my just 3 minutes ago. Ren watched the old principal continue to glare daggers at Gojo and Yuji, his grip trembling on his cane. Ren let out a quiet exhale through his nose. Good to know, he mused. The supernatural handsomeness trait doesn't work on grumpy old men. The waiting room of the Tokyo branch was tense, loud, and entirely devoid of any actual strategic planning. Yuji sat perfectly still in the center of the room, sweating profusely. Nobara was standing directly over him, violently kicking the leg of his folding chair every few seconds. I cried, Nobara yelled, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. She delivered another sharp kick to the metal chair leg. Clang. Do you have any idea how much I cried over you? You absolute idiot?
I'm sorry.
I really am, Yuji pleaded, holding his hands up in defense. Gojo-sensei told me it would be a hilarious surprise. He said you guys would be crying tears of joy. I'm going to cry tears of joy when I bury you myself, Nobara snapped. Megumi sat a few feet away, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He was projecting an aura of pure, freezing hostility. He didn't yell. He just stared a hole directly through Yuji's skull. Fushiguro, please say something, Yuji begged, looking at his dark-haired classmate. The silent treatment is worse than the kicking. You should have stayed dead, Megumi stated flatly. Salmon, Toj nodded in absolute agreement from the corner. Run sat near the back of the room, leaning his chair against the wall on 2 legs. He watched the chaotic reunion play. The Goodwill event was starting in less than an hour. That meant current balance, 41,595 system points. Run stared at the translucent blue interface hovering in his vision. He needed at least another 8,500 points to hit the 50,000 threshold. His mind shifted to the real threat, Kenjaku. If Ren popped up on Kenjaku's radar right now, then he wasn't strong enough to play in that weight class yet. He needed to farm the invaders without drawing the mastermind's direct attention. So, how to farm 8,500 points? Ren mentally listed the possibilities. Target 1, the Kyoto students. Beating up Mai or Momo would probably only drop a few hundred points. Defeating Aoi to do might trigger a decent hidden achievement, but fighting to do was a massive waste of stamina. The guy was a physical tank. Cheap. Target 2, Juzo Kamiya, the bald curse user who wanted to turn Gojo into a coat rack. He was a solid grade 1 threat, maybe a weak special grade. Taking him out before Principal Gakuganji got to him could definitely trigger a major achievement. High priority. Target 3, Hanami, the disaster curse of the forest. This was the gold mine. Renew Yuji and Tadu were destined to fight Hanami, but if he could step in, land a critical blow, or trigger an achievement like survive a disaster curse or interrupt a domain expansion, the system would undoubtedly shower him in points. Hey, Rein. Ren blinked, the blue interface vanishing from his sight. He dropped his chair forward so all 4 legs hit the floor. Maki was standing at the front of the room, her steel staff resting against her shoulder. She had finally decided to put an end to the first-year drama. Nobara was still glaring at Yuji, but she had stopped kicking his chair. Are you paying attention? Or just sleeping with your eyes open? Maki asked, her amber eyes narrowing slightly. Fully attentive, boss? Rin said smoothly, resting his elbows on his knees. Just waiting for my deployment orders. Maki let out a short sigh, pulling out a rolled-up map of the campus grounds and slapping it down on the table. All right, listen up, Maki commanded, her tone shifting into pure, uncompromising leadership. Ren, Maki said. Satoru put you on the roster at the last possible second, which means Kyoto has zero intel on you. You're our wild card. I want you roaming the perimeter. Don't engage the Kyoto main group unless you have to. Stick to the shadows, hunt the stray curses, and if any of us get into serious trouble, you flank them. Ren smiled, the tactical freedom matching perfectly with his own hidden agenda. He stood up, adjusting his dark jacket. Copy that, Ren nodded. I'll keep the perimeter clean. Good, Maki said, rolling the map back up. She slammed the end of her steel staff against the floor, the heavy thud ringing through the concrete room. Let's go ruin their day. I stood near the edge of the woods, ignoring the sound of Kumo laying out their patrol routes. She dug her fingernails into her own palms. Her face still felt uncomfortably warm. She hated the feeling. She absolutely hated the guy with the dark jacket. The transfer student from Antarctica. Complete joke. She dragged a hand down her face, trying to wipe away the lingering heat. It didn't work. When she had locked eyes with him in the courtyard, her entire nervous system had short-circuited. A heavy, suffocating wave of comfort had settled over her shoulders out of nowhere. It made her muscles go slack. It made her want to drop her guard. I curled her lip in disgust, her stomach twisting. Comfort. Safety. What a massive, pathetic lie. The Zenin clan didn't do safe. Safe was a word people used right before they threw you into a pit of curses and locked the door. She spent her entire life building walls, learning how to bite back, learning how to hold a gun so her hands wouldn't shake. And some random guy just stood there with his hands in his pockets and made it all evaporate. Was it a cursed technique? An illusion? Mind control? He didn't know and she didn't care. The worst part of it all was where he was standing, right next to Maki. Maki who left her behind to rot. Maki who walked around with that stupid, arrogant polearm acting like she owned the world. And this guy was just casually standing in her personal space, looking completely unbothered by the chaos around him. I pulled her revolver from her leather holster. The cold steel felt grounding. Real. She flicked the cylinder open, checking the 6 rubber bullets resting inside. She gave it a hard spin and snapped it shut with a sharp flick of her wrist. The loud clack of the metal made Miwa jump slightly a few feet away. I ignored her. "Meh. Are you listening?" Kumo asked, his tone flat and strict. "I hear you," I snapped. She shoved the revolver back onto her hip. She didn't care about the pink-haired idiot who came out of a box. She had her own objective now. When the alarms went off to start the event, she was going to find the dark-haired guy, and was going to point her barrel right at his forehead and pull the trigger. She wanted to see if he still looked so calm and comfortable with a rubber bullet fracturing his skull. She was going to shoot him, and it was going to prove that whatever she felt in the courtyard was just a stupid trick. It had to. A harsh electronic siren blared over the loudspeakers. Gojo's voice echoed across the campus, cheerfully yelling some nonsense about the event officially starting. Maki didn't hesitate. She launched herself forward, her steel staff gripped tightly. The rest of the Tokyo team moved right alongside her. Yuji and Megumi took the front, their boots tearing chunks of dirt from the ground. Nobara, Panda, and Toj followed close behind. Nobody looked back. Within seconds, the dense tree line swallowed them whole. The dust settled. Rin stood completely alone near the starting line. He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and turned away from the main path. Maki ordered him to stick to the perimeter. He was perfectly fine with that. He kept him off the Kyoto team's radar and gave him absolute freedom to hunt. He stepped into the thick brush. The heavy canopy blocked out the afternoon sun, plunging the outer woods into deep shadows. Ren pulled his thumb back. The dark metal guard of nightfall clicked faintly against the scabbard. Soon, a massive crash echoed from the center of the forest. A flock of birds scattered frantically into the sky. A heavy shockwave rattled the branches above Ren's head, shaking leaves loose. Yuji and Tadu, they had already found each other. Ren ignored the noise and kept walking the outer edge. A grade 3 curse, shaped like a bloated centipede, dropped from a branch right above his head. Ren didn't even look up. He sidestepped, drew his sword in a single fluid motion, and sliced upward. The grade 1 steel cut cleanly through the hard shell. The curse split in two and dissolved into purple ash before it hit the dirt. Plus 5 system points. A tiny blue notification blinked in the corner of his eye. He swiped it away. 5 points meant nothing right now. Nightfall clicked shut in its scabbard. Run picked up the pace, boots completely silent against the forest floor. Weak energy signatures scattered across the dense woods didn't matter. His focus stayed locked on the horizon above the trees. A massive boom shook the ground. Trees snapped and cracked in the distance. A thick cloud of brown dust rose high above the green canopy, marking exactly where Yuji and Tadu were tearing the forest apart. Ren sat on a wide, mossy rock. He leaned back, resting his elbows on his knees, completely ignoring the chaos echoing a mile away. He tapped a slow, steady rhythm against Nightfall's dark scabbard. Hunting weak curses for 5 points a kill was a massive waste of calories. He let out a long yawn, watching a flock of birds scatter from the shaking trees. The observation room, a black crow circled high above the forest, its eyes locked dead on the guy sitting on the rock. Inside the dark viewing room, the wall of monitors flickered with live feeds. Most of the screens showed brutal fights. Maki spinning her polearm, Megumi trading heavy blows, Yuji getting slammed through a tree root. Then there was Monitor 4. Gojo Satoru leaned forward in his leather chair. He pulled his blindfold down an inch, staring hard at the screen. "What is he doing?" Gojo complained, pointing a long finger at the glass. "Why is he just sitting there? I told him to go wild." Yudaheim crossed her arms, glaring at the same screen. "That is your secret weapon? The transfer student from Antarctica? He usually hits things." Gojo whined. He grabbed a piece of popcorn and chucked it at the monitor. "Rain, get up. Go or a farm." Mei sat near the front, resting her chin on her intertwined fingers. She smiled, her eyes tracking Ren's completely relaxed posture. He has an interesting sense of timing, or he simply lacks motivation. I could motivate him for the right price. "He's not for sale, Mei," Gojo grumbled, sliding down in his chair until he was practically horizontal. "He's supposed to be ruining the Kyoto team's day." Principal Gakuganji sat rigid in the corner, both hands clamped heavily over his wooden cane. He glared at Monitor 4 with pure disgust. "Your Tokyo branch is a disgrace, Satoru," Gakuganji rasped. "He's pacing himself," Gojo fired back instantly, though he sounded deeply annoyed. Yudaheim rolled her eyes. "He's taking a nap, Satoru." On the screen, Run reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small mint, unwrapped it, tossed it into his mouth and looked up at the sky. Gojo groaned loudly, throwing his hands over his face. "Unbelievable. I'm docking his allowance." Back in the forest, Run crunched the mint between his teeth. The sharp burst of peppermint had just hit the back of his throat when the wind suddenly died. The echoing crashes from Yuji's fight faded out, swallowed by an unnatural, heavy silence. Then the blue sky vanished. A massive, ink-black dome washed over the forest canopy, casting the woods in deep shadow. The veil was up. The invasion had officially started, right on schedule. Ren slid off the mossy rock. He reached over his shoulder, his fingers brushing the hilt of his grade 1 katana. Crack. Bark exploded from the tree trunk right next to his head. Ren turned. My Zenin stood at the edge of the clearing. She looked terrible. Her uniform jacket was torn at the shoulder and caked in thick mud. A dark purple bruise was already swelling on her cheek line. Maki had clearly already found her twin sister and finished their fight. Despite looking like she could barely stand, Mai raised her revolver. Her hands shook slightly, but she aimed right at his chest. "What are you doing?" Ren asked. He kept his voice completely flat. She didn't answer. She pulled the trigger. Ren didn't even draw his sword. He just shifted his weight and stepped to the left. The rubber bullet zipped harmlessly past his ear. He didn't wait for her to cock the hammer again. He kicked off the dirt, crossing the 30 feet between them in a fraction of a second. Mai's eyes went wide. She tried to step back and re-aim, but she was way too slow. Ren grabbed her wrist and twisted it sharply downward. Mai let out a short yelp of pain. The heavy revolver slipped from her fingers and hit the grass. Without breaking momentum, Ren swept her leg, dropping her hard onto the forest floor. He immediately planted his knee between her shoulder blades and pinned her right arm firmly behind her back. The whole fight took 2 seconds. "Get off me!"
Mei yelled.
She thrashed against the dirt, trying to throw him off. Ren didn't budge. His physical density easily absorbed her struggling without giving an inch. "You just shot at me," Ren said, keeping his grip steady. "You look like you already lost a fight. Why are you tracking me down?" Mai stopped thrashing. She lay flat against the ground, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. She turned her head, glaring up at the black barrier blocking out the sun. "What is this?" She spat, completely ignoring his question. "What is this stupid veil? Did Satoru change the rules?" Ren released his grip and stood up. He didn't offer Mai a hand. He just looked up at the pitch-black sky blocking out the sun. "This isn't the event," Ren said flatly. "It's a real attack. Stay here or run." He turned his back on her and started walking toward the edge of the barrier. His target was Juzo Kamiya. The Bald Curse user was a solid grade 1 threat, which meant a high payout from the system. Mai lay in the dirt for a second. She gritted her teeth, grabbing her revolver from the grass. She checked the cylinder, snapped it shut, and stood up. Her legs felt heavy, but she started walking in the exact same direction. Ren heard her boots crunching over the dead leaves behind him. They moved through the dense woods quickly. The closer they got to the edge of the black veil, the louder the noise became. A heavy, distorted electric guitar riff ripped through the trees. The sound wave carried actual physical force, shaking the branches and kicking up dirt. Ren stepped into a wide clearing near the barrier's edge. Principal Gakuganji stood 30 yards away. The old man held a red electric guitar. He struck the strings, sending another violent wave of cursed energy forward. The attack hit a bald, shirtless man wearing a butcher's apron. Juzo Kamiya dug his boots into the dirt, holding up a massive, fleshy bone axe to block the sound wave. The ground around him splintered, but he just laughed. "Old man bones make terrible coat racks," Juzo yelled, stepping forward. "I need Satoru Gojo's spine." Ren didn't wait. He drew Nightfall in a single fluid motion. The dark steel hummed as it cleared the scabbard. Juzo noticed the movement. He turned his head, his crazy eyes locking onto Ren. "Who are you?" "Nice sword. You've got a good spine for a handle." Ren didn't bother talking. He planted his back foot and launched himself forward. His heavenly restriction speed carried him across the clearing in a fraction of a second. Juzo's eyes went wide. The curse user barely had time to raise his heavy axe. Ren ducked under the clumsy horizontal swing. He pivoted, bringing nightfall up in a tight, brutal arc. The katana sheared straight through the thick bone handle of Juzo's axe. The weapon fell apart in the butcher's hands. Before Juzo could step back, a loud gunshot echoed across the clearing. I stood at the tree line. Smoke drifted from the barrel of her revolver. The rubber bullet slammed directly into Juzo's shoulder. It didn't break the skin, but the blunt force impact made the curse user flinch and drop his guard.
Rain capitalized instantly.
He drove his boot hard into the side of Juzo's knee. A loud snap echoed over the grass. Juzo screamed, his leg giving out. He crashed hard into the dirt. Ren stepped over him. He reversed his grip on Nightfall and drove the blade down toward the back of the butcher's neck. A massive, ringing guitar chord blasted the ground right in front of Ren's boots. The shockwave pushed Ren back a full step, forcing him to pull his strike.
Halt!
Principal Gakuganji ordered. He walked forward, his grip tight on his guitar neck. He looked at Ren, his wrinkled face set in a hard scowl. Stand down, boy. Do not kill him. We need him alive for interrogation. Ren stared at the old man. He looked down at Juzo, who was groaning in the dirt and clutching his shattered knee. Ren clicked his tongue in annoyance and sheathed Nightfall. A sharp chime rang in his head. The blue holographic interface expanded in his field of vision, the text glowing bright gold. Achievement unlocked. First curse user. Detail. Defeat a curse user for the first time. Calculating target threat level. Grade 1. Reward. Plus 8,000 system points. Ren let out a slow breath. He checked the top right corner of the screen. Current balance. 49,595 system points. He was incredibly close. Ren dismissed the screen. He turned around and walked past Gakuganji without saying a word. I stood near the trees, her revolver lowered. She stared at him, still trying to process how fast the fight ended. Ren walked right past her, his eyes scanning the dark woods for the next target. Ren kept walking through the dense trees, leaving Mai and the principal behind. A loud, deafening crack echoed across the sky. Ren stopped and looked up. The massive black dome covering the forest splintered like a broken mirror. Huge chunks of the veil dissolved into ash, letting the bright afternoon sun flood back into the woods. High above the tree line, a single figure floated in the air. Satoru Gojo. Even from a distance, Ren could feel the heavy, suffocating weight of his teacher's cursed energy. Gojo raised a single hand, pointing his fingers toward the deep center of the forest. A massive sphere of purple energy sparked to life. It shot downward at a terrifying angle. The ground violently shook. A blinding flash washed over the trees, followed by a roar that sounded like a hurricane. The shockwave knocked leaves and loose branches down around Ren. When the dust finally settled, Ren looked past the tree line. A gigantic, perfectly smooth trench had been carved straight through the earth, erasing everything in its path. Well, Ren muttered, shoving his hands in his jacket pockets. That's one way to end an invasion. He started walking again, stepping over uprooted roots and shattered stones. The woods were quiet now. The heavy, negative pressure from the invading curses was completely gone. A few minutes later, he stepped into a clearing near a ruined shrine. Yutahime Iori stood near the broken wooden steps. She had a small scratch on her cheek, and her red and white shrine maiden uniform was covered in dust. She was glaring intensely at the massive, smoking trench Gojo had just carved into the landscape. Rough day, Ren asked, his voice calm. Yutahime jumped slightly and spun around. Her hand rested on the hilt of her sword. When she saw him, her grip loosened. She let out a long sigh. You, the transfer student, Yutahime said. Ren, he corrected. She put her hands on her hips, her brow furrowing into a strict scowl. Where is the rest of your team? You shouldn't be wandering around the forest alone. This isn't a training exercise anymore. We were under attack. I noticed, Rin said smoothly, walking closer. I just helped your principal with a bald guy wearing a butcher's apron. He's tied up near the barrier edge. Yudaheim blinked. Her strict expression faltered. Juzo? You fought Juzo Kamiya? I just kicked his knee. Rin shrugged. The old man did the heavy lifting with his guitar. Yudaheim stared at him for a long second. She looked him up and down, searching for injuries. He didn't have a single scratch on him. He just looked completely bored. She rubbed her temples, turning her attention back to the giant crater in the distance. Satoru always goes overboard, Yudaheim grumbled, genuine annoyance in her voice. He completely ruined the forest. There was absolutely no need for that level of destruction. Rin stopped a few feet next to her. He looked at the smoking trench. He lacks volume control. Yudaheim looked at him sideways. That is putting it incredibly lightly. He is a menace. Shoko said he stole her will to live, Rin noted flatly. Yudaheim paused. A short, genuine laugh escaped her lips. She quickly covered her mouth with her hand, clearing her throat to regain her professional composure. Shoko is completely right. Yudaheim smiled slightly, shaking her head. I've known him since we were teenagers. He only gets worse with age. Good to know. I'll make sure to keep my distance, Rin said. Yudaheim looked at Rin properly this time. The annoyance she usually felt dealing with anyone from Tokyo was gone. He wasn't loud. He wasn't arrogant. He didn't act like everything was a joke. He just stood there, perfectly grounded and quiet. She crossed her arms. You really aren't from Antarctica, are you? Rin gave a small, amused smile.
No.
Tokyo. Gojo just likes making things complicated for no reason. Crack. The sharp ring of an aluminum bat hitting leather echoed across the sun-drenched field. Yuji Itadori took off like a bullet, rounding first base at a speed that would have shattered international athletic records, cheering at the top of his lungs. A few yards away, Aoi Tadu was loudly weeping tears of joy, declaring Yuji his best friend for the 5th time that inning. Run sat on the edge of the Tokyo dugout, his face a perfectly flat, unreadable mask. He rested his chin in his hand, staring blankly out at the diamond. How the hell is everyone so calm? Rin thought, his brain struggling to reconcile the sheer absurdity of the situation. 24 hours ago, a botanical nightmare was trying to turn us all into fertilizer. People died. A coordinated terrorist attack hit the school, and Satoru Gojo literally erased a zip code off the map with hollow purple. And today we're playing baseball. He watched Satoru Gojo, wearing completely casual clothes over his uniform, loudly heckling Principal Gakuganji from behind home plate. A sharp, dangerous aura to his left pulled Ren from his existential crisis. Maki was sitting a few feet away, aggressively taping the grip of her bat. Her eyes, sharp behind her wire-rimmed glasses, were locked in a lethal staring contest with the opposing dugout. Across the field, Mai Zenin was sitting on the Kyoto bench with her legs crossed, twirling a strand of her dark hair. She was glaring right back at Maki with a toxic mixture of disdain and deeply buried resentment. The tension between the two sisters was so thick you could cut it with a cursed tool. It was a localized Cold War right there on the bleachers. Ren let out a slow, quiet breath. He leaned back against the bench, stretching his legs out casually. You know, Ren said, his voice flat and perfectly conversational, completely cutting through Maki's intense focus. If you two just locked yourselves in a room and talked for 5 minutes without trying to shoot or stab each other, it would probably save everyone a massive headache. Maki's head snapped toward him, her grip on the bat tightening. A faint dust of pink hit her cheeks, partly from being called out and partly from the sheer audacity of him doing it in public. Shut up, she hissed. glancing around to ensure no one else was listening. I'm just saying, Ren continued smoothly, unfazed by her glare. The telepathic death glares are giving me second-hand exhaustion. Yesterday was a lot. Just tell her she did a good job not dying, and move on. It's not that deep. Maki dragged a hand down her face, desperately trying to hide the furious blush creeping up her neck. She shot him a glare that was meant to be lethal, but entirely lacked its usual heat. I am going to push you into a wood chipper if you don't get out there, she muttered under her breath, delivering a sharp but harmless kick to his shin under the bench where no one else could see. You're up next, idiot. Taking his cue to leave before her embarrassment boiled over into an actual scene, Ren gave her a brief, teasing smirk that only she could catch. He stepped out of the dugout shadow and into the bright sun, tossing his leather glove onto the equipment bench and pulling a metal bat from the rack. Satoru Gojo was leaning against the chain-link fence right behind home plate. He wore his usual black uniform and blindfold, but he had a blue umpire's cap sitting sideways on his head. A bright pink lollipop stuck out of the corner of his mouth. Look at you, playing family therapist, Gojo said around the candy stick as Rin approached the batter's box. He flashed a massive grin.
Very mature, Rein-kun.
A true peacemaker. Rin didn't look at him. He stepped up to the plate and took a slow practice swing. The metal bat cut through the air with a sharp whistle. I just want them to stop glaring, Rin said flatly. The negative energy in there was giving me a headache. Ah, the healing power of youth, Gojo sighed, crossing his arms dramatically behind the umpire's mask, fixing deep-rooted clan trauma right before the first pitch. So beautiful. Did it work? They haven't killed each other yet, Rin said. He rolled his shoulders, testing the weight of the bat, and tapped the plate. We'll see. Gojo laughed, pulling the lollipop out of his mouth. Give it 5 minutes. The Zenin girls hold grudges like it's an Olympic sport. Out on the mound, Mekamaru paused, waiting for the catcher's signal. Gojo didn't move from his spot right behind home plate, but as Rin settled into his stance, the teacher leaned in close to the netting, dropping his voice just enough so only Ren could hear him over the chatter of the game. You know, Gojo said casually, swirling the lollipop stick in his mouth, my eyes pick up a lot of useless data. Heart rates, core temperatures, blood flow. Ren kept his eyes forward, locking onto the pitching machine. Fascinating. I watched the camera feeds from the forest yesterday, Gojo continued, a knowing, dangerous smirk playing on his lips. Mai was pretty frantic when you pinned her to the dirt. Her heart rate went completely wild. And it wasn't just adrenaline from the fight. Ren paused his practice swing. He didn't turn around. What are you getting at? Gojo flashed a massive, entirely unhelpful grin. I'm saying the Kyoto sniper was staring at you in the courtyard yesterday, and she's definitely staring at you right now. Ren glanced over his shoulder toward the dugout. Mai was now leaning against the fence, her eyes locked directly on his back. The second he made eye contact, she flinched. She quickly crossed her arms tighter and aggressively glared down at the dirt. The tips of her ears were visibly pink. Ren turned back to face the mound. His expression remained completely deadpan. Maybe it's a twin thing, Gojo mused, tapping his chin. They share the same DNA. Maybe they share a psychic link for bad taste in guys? A shared biological imperative. That is not how genetics work, Rin stated flatly. Who knows? Gojo laughed softly. But you are standing right in the middle of a very volatile, very heavily armed Zenin landmine. How are you going to handle 2 angry sisters wanting a piece of you, Romeo? Ren just dug his back cleat into the dirt and raised the metal bat. I'm going to hit the ball, Rin said. Out on the mound, Mekamaru threw the pitch. A nasty, high-speed fastball right down the middle. Unuamuan. The deafening crack of metal annihilating leather echoed across the entire field. The ball launched straight up into the bright blue sky, moving like a bullet as it easily cleared the distant tree line. Gojo pulled the lollipop out of his mouth and let out a loud, obnoxious cheer. Ren didn't even bother tracking the ball's arc. He casually dropped the bat into the dirt, stepped out of the box, and walked back to the dugout. Satoru clapped loudly from behind the chain-link fence, shouting, "Home run!" The transfer student clears the board. Back on the wooden bench, Megumi was shaking his head in quiet disbelief, while Nobara gripped the fencing, aggressively yelling insults at the Kyoto team's pitcher. Ren stepped into the shade of the dugout and sat down next to Panda. The large cursed corpse nudged Ren's shoulder. "Nice swing. Didn't know you played." "I don't," Ren replied flatly, resting his elbows on his knees. Almost instantly, a sharp chime rang in his head, and the familiar blue holographic interface snapped open in his field of vision. The text glowed a bright, rewarding gold. Achievement unlocked. Casual dominance. Detail. Assert absolute physical superiority in a competitive event without relying on cursed energy. Reward. Plus 500 system points. Ren stared at the floating screen, quickly pulling up his totals. Current balance, 50,095 system points. He finally had the 50,000 points required to upgrade his Grade 1 katana Nightfall into a special grade weapon. With a subtle swipe of his hand, he dismissed the blue light. He had the points. Now he just needed a quiet place to manually imbue the blade with the reverse curse technique. Ren stood up, grabbing his dark jacket off the bench. Panda looked over. "Where are you going?" "Vending machines," Ren said. "Gojo's yelling is giving me a migraine." Panda nodded in deep sympathy, turning his attention back to the field where Satoru was currently arguing with Principal Gakuganji over a foul ball. Ren slipped out the back of the concrete dugout. The shouting from the game muffled significantly as he rounded the corner, stepping into the cool, quiet shade of a massive oak tree where the drink machines were tucked out of sight. He dropped a few coins into the slot and pressed the button for a black coffee. Just as the can clattered into the metal tray, the sound of crunching grass caught his attention. Maki walked around the corner of the dugout. She didn't look like she was casually wandering. She walked with immediate purpose, her eyes locking onto him the second he was in view. She stepped up to the machine next to him, dropping her own coins in. "You didn't even watch it land," she noted, hitting the button for green tea. "I already knew where it was going," Ren said smoothly, bending down to retrieve his coffee. Maki caught her cold can from the tray. She looked back toward the path leading to the field, verifying they were completely alone. Hidden behind the thick concrete wall and the massive tree trunk, they were invisible to the rest of the school. Before Ren could even formulate a deadpan reply, Maki reached out. Her hand grabbed the collar of his jacket, and she pulled him in hard. Ren didn't fight it. He set his coffee down on the top of the machine and met her halfway, wrapping his arms securely around her waist. The kiss was fast, urgent, and heavy. Maki pressed him back against the metal of the vending machine, her hands sliding up his neck and tangling in his dark hair. Ren's hands slid up her back, pulling her flush against his chest, completely swallowing the space between them. When they finally broke apart for air, Maki kept her forehead pressed firmly against his chin. Her chest heaved slightly, and her face was burning a brilliant, beautiful red. "Run," she said quietly. "Yeah." She hesitated, her thumb absent-mindedly tracing the fabric of his collar. "When was the last time we actually had time alone? Properly?" Run let his hands rest naturally on her waist, his thumbs rubbing soothing circles against her sides. "A little over a month ago." She nodded, her cheeks flashing an even deeper shade of crimson. "Right? Our first time." "Yeah," Ren said, his voice dropping into a smooth, comforting tone. Between Satoru constantly throwing me at curses and you running the first years into the dirt, we haven't exactly had a lot of free time to sneak away. Maki shifted her weight, pressing herself even closer. My patience is completely shot, Maki muttered, her voice dropping into a rough, frustrated whisper. She finally looked up, meeting his eyes with a heavy, demanding intensity. Between the tournament, and having to pretend we're just classmates all day, it's pissing me off. I'm too keyed up. She didn't need to spell it out. The physical tension radiating from her body and the dark, focused look in her eyes said everything he needed to know. Ren's grip on her waist tightened, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. I know exactly what you mean, Ren murmured, leaning down to press a soft, lingering kiss against her jaw. I'm feeling the exact same way. Ren pulled back slightly, his thumbs tracing the line of her hips. So, he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. When? Maki looked away, her eyes scanning the concrete wall as if checking for eavesdroppers before she leaned back into his space. Tomorrow, she said, her voice small but firm. Let's go on a date. Outside of Tokyo. Somewhere quiet. No gojo, no school. Just us. Rin smiled, the expression warm and genuine. I'm holding you to that. He let the silence settle for a moment before shifting the topic. Did you ever get a chance to talk to your sister? Maki let out a long, heavy sigh, her shoulders dropping. The mention of my always brought a specific kind of exhaustion to her face. Not properly. She's still being her, Maki muttered, her grip on his jacket loosening as she stepped back to create a little professional distance. I'll talk to her. Eventually. She reached down, picking up her cold can of green tea from the vending machine tray and taking a final, grounding sip. Come on. If we stay back here any longer, Panda's going to start making up theories that'll make my head explode. Ren laughed, picking up his forgotten coffee from the grass. Copy that, boss. They walked side by side back toward the shouting and the rhythmic crack of bats, the heat of the afternoon sun feeling a lot more manageable than the tension they had just left behind the dugout. Ren locked his dorm room door. He dropped onto the edge of the mattress and pulled Nightfall from his inventory. The dark scabbard rested heavily across his knees. System, he said. The blue interface appeared in the quiet room. Current balance, 50,095 system points. He opened the weapon menu. He selected Nightfall and hit the upgrade tier. Upgrade weapon. Grade 1- Special grade. Cost, 50,000 system points. Confirm. Ren tapped yes. His point balance instantly plummeted to 95. The blue screen wiped away, shifting into a bright, aggressive gold. Special grade imbuement mechanics unlocked. Would you like to utilize directed imbuement to manually select a curse technique?
/N.
Rin tapped the Y. He focused on Shoko's lecture from the morgue, pushing the precise theoretical math of reverse curse technique into the system prompt. The interface chimed. A small loading circle spun.
Technique validated. Reverse cursed technique.
Calculating premium cost. A new text block dropped onto the screen. Cost to imbue RCT, 125,000 system points. Ren stared at the glowing numbers. His expression went completely flat. The faint hum of the dorm's air vent suddenly seemed incredibly loud. What? He muttered. The system chimed again. Another notification box popped up, completely ignoring his shock. Insufficient funds. Notice, if directed imbuement is bypassed, the weapon will naturally absorb ambient negative energy and permanently manifest a random cursed technique. Once manifested, the slot cannot be overwritten. Would you like to suspend natural manifestation until funds are acquired?
/N.
Ren let his head fall forward. He dragged a hand down his face, staring at the pathetic 95 points left in his top corner. He needed another so much more just to make the katana work the way he wanted. He slouched, his shoulders dropping. "What choice do I have?" he muttered, his voice hollow and defeated. "Stop it." He tapped the screen.
Manifestation suspended.
Weapon upgrade complete. The holographic interface pulsed. The bright gold border shifted back to the standard blue.
Manifestation suspended.
Weapon upgrade complete. The heavy scabbard resting across his knees suddenly grew ice cold. Ren grabbed the hilt and pulled the blade free. Nightfall looked completely different. The metal wasn't just dark anymore. It actively absorbed the dim light in the room. The crystalline silver edge was gone, replaced by a pitch-black cutting edge. Faint, dark mist bled off the steel, curling into the air before vanishing. The weight felt altered. It was perfectly balanced, feeling less like a forged piece of metal and more like a natural extension of his own arm. He turned the blade, watching the shadows warp around the steel. A sharp chime rang in his ears. The interface expanded, pushing a new block of glowing gold text directly into his line of sight.
Achieving unlocked. Arsenal Apex.
Detail. Successfully possess and wield a special grade cursed tool. Run let out a slow exhale, his eyes dropping to the next line. Calculating reward. Reward 1. Plus 25,000 system points. Reward 2. Weapon trait unlocked. Soul bond. Description. The special grade weapon Nightfall is now bound to the user's unique energy signature. It cannot be wielded, stolen, or utilized by any other entity. Run watched his balance tracker instantly update in the top corner of the screen. Current balance, 25,095 system points. He rested his elbows on his knees, holding the newly upgraded weapon. 25 grand. It was a massive payout just for owning the weapon. It dragged him out of the double digits, but the math still stared him right in the face. He was exactly 100,000 points short of buying the reverse curse technique imbuement. Ren slid the blade back into its scabbard. The sharp click echoed loudly in the quiet dorm. The space in the center of his locked dorm room instantly warped. A sharp rush of displaced air kicked up dust from the floorboards. Satoru Gojo appeared right at the foot of the bed. The blindfolded teacher stood tall, hands casually tucked into his pockets. The usual obnoxious grin was missing. Gojo just tilted his head, staring intensely at Ren. Gojo just tilted his head, staring intensely at Ren. The 6 eyes were locked dead onto the pitch-black blade resting in Ren's hands. The suffocating, abyss-like aura radiating from Nightfall was fundamentally different from the Grade 1 steel it had been exactly 24 hours ago. The ambient cursed energy in the dorm room was literally warping around the metal. Before Ren could even formulate a half-decent lie to feed the world's strongest sorcerer, the hallway outside echoed with heavy, aggressive footsteps. Crack. The locked wooden door of Ren's dorm room practically exploded off its hinges. Satoru! Yutaheim Iori stormed into the room, her shrine maiden uniform dusted with debris, looking absolutely furious. You do not get to just teleport away in the middle of... Right behind her, ducking slightly to fit through the ruined doorframe, stepped Principal Mazumichi Yaga. The massive, intimidating man crossed his thick arms behind his back, his dark sunglasses reflecting the dim light of the dorm room. Run sat perfectly still on the edge of his mattress, a bead of cold sweat rolling down his forehead. He was now boxed into a 10x10 dorm room with the strongest sorcerer alive, a fiercely strict Grade 1 instructor, and the principal of Tokyo Jujutsu High. And he was holding an unregistered special grade weapon. Yutaheim, shoo. Look, Gojo said, not even turning around to acknowledge her dramatic entrance. He pointed a long finger directly at the katana resting on Ren's knees. Gojo casually tapped his chin.
Rein-kun.
I have a very good memory. In fact, it's perfect. And I distinctly remember that dark little katana being registered as a simple grade 1 yesterday. Why am I currently looking at a special grade? The room went dead silent. Yudaheim stopped yelling. She blinked, her gaze dropping to the blade in Ren's lap. Principal Yaga visibly stiffened, his intimidating posture shifting into absolute, rigid shock. A special grade? Yaga rumbled, his deep voice carrying immediate authority. Satoru, are you certain? Oh, completely? Gojo grinned, pulling his blindfold down just a fraction to expose one gleaming blue eye. It's practically drinking the ambient energy in the room. Very high-tier stuff. So, student, care to explain? Ren's mind raced. He had 25,095 system points, an incomplete heavenly restriction, and absolutely zero logical explanation for what just happened. The intimacy transfer lie wouldn't work on a piece of metal. So he went with the only defense he had left, absolute weaponized stupidity. Run looked down at the dark blade, then looked up at the 3 elite sorcerers staring a hole through his skull. He let his expression drop into a perfectly blank, completely dumb face. I was just holding it, Bryn said, keeping his voice entirely flat and innocent. Yudaheim stared at him like he had grown a second head. You were just holding it? Yeah. Bryn nodded, gripping the hilt. He offered a helpless, highly unconvincing shrug. I was just holding it, and then it I don't know what happened. It evolved into a special grade. He looked directly into Principal Yaga's dark sunglasses. It's hard to believe, right? Rin added, his tone dripping with forced earnestness. The silence that followed was agonizing. Yaga looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. Yudaheim's jaw actually dropped. Gojo, however, burst out laughing. He slapped his knee, his loud cackle echoing off the cramped dorm walls. Evolved! Gojo wheezed, wiping a fake tear from his exposed eye. What is it? A Pokemon? Satoru, stop playing around, Yaga bellowed. A tool doesn't just wake up because a sorcerer has potential. Achieving special grade status requires either a binding vow of the highest caliber or the forced binding of a special grade soul into an inanimate vessel. You're claiming this boy did in an afternoon what takes the great family's generations to achieve. Principal Yaga is right, Yudaheim added, stepping forward with her hand resting cautiously on her own hilt. She looked at Ren with deep suspicion. Who exactly gave you that weapon? Transfer student? Ren completely ignored the rising killing intent in the room. He looked at Gojo, sticking entirely to his ridiculous narrative. Maybe it absorbed some weird residual energy from the baseball game, Ren suggested, his face a mask of pure nonchalance. I did hit a home run. Gojo let out another loud laugh, throwing his hands behind his head. I love this kid. Yaga, we're keeping him. He's hilarious. We are going to confiscate that weapon and have Shoko and the technical staff inspected immediately, Yaga ordered, taking a heavy step toward the bed. Before Yaga could take a single step toward the mattress, Gojo smoothly intercepted. He blurred across the small space and snatched Nightfall right out of Ren's lap. Hold on, Principal. Let the expert handle the dangerous artifacts, Gojo said, holding the pitch-black scabbard up to the dim light. Ren immediately slumped his shoulders. Hey, he whined, letting his voice crack just enough to sound like a perfectly petulant teenager getting his favorite toy stolen. I was holding that. Satoru, give it back. It's mine. Gojo completely ignored the fake tears. He slid the blade out a few inches. The ambient energy in the room immediately swirled toward the dark steel, drawn in like water down a drain. Fascinating, Gojo murmured, his tone dropping its usual playful lilt. To properly test its capacity, Gojo dropped his infinity just around his fingertips, allowing his bare skin to grip the hilt. He attempted to feed a microscopic, highly controlled drop of his own limitless cursed energy into the blade. The reaction was instantaneous and violently explosive. A massive shockwave of black and blood-red cursed energy erupted directly from the hilt. It sounded like a localized thunderclap inside the tiny 10 by 10 dorm. The violent flash of red and black lightning arced wildly, mimicking the visual distortion of a black flash. But instead of an attack, it was pure, aggressive rejection. The kinetic force tore a jagged gash into the wooden floorboards and instantly shattered the small window above Ren's bed, sending glass raining onto the desk. Gojo's eyes widened in genuine surprise. His infinity instinctively snapped back up to protect him from the spatial distortion, violently repelling the katana out of his hand. Nightfall clattered heavily onto the floorboards, completely unharmed, the dark, oppressive mist instantly settling back into a calm hum the second it left Gojo's grasp. The room fell into a dead, ringing silence, save for the evening wind blowing through the shattered window. Principal Yaga had his thick arms raised, shielding his face from the blast. Yutaheim had half-drawn her katana, her eyes wide with shock. Ren looked down at his katana on the floor, then slowly looked up at Gojo. "You broke my window," he deadpants. Gojo just stared at his right hand. The air around his fingers was still sizzling with expelled red energy. Then, a massive, unhinged grin split across his face. "Did you see that?" Gojo yelled, spinning toward Yaga and Yutaheim, looking like a kid who just opened the best Christmas present ever. "It actively rejected my cursed energy." "Satoru, what just happened?" Yaga demanded, his deep voice tight with alarm. "Was that a cursed technique?" Gojo lowered his hand, his exposed bright blue eye locking onto Ren. His gaze was practically vibrating with academic excitement. "It's a soul bind," Gojo beamed, pointing enthusiastically at the blade. "It hates everyone's energy but his." Gojo knelt down and picked the weapon back up. This time, he kept his infinity entirely active around his hands, essentially holding it with an invisible spatial glove so his energy never actually touched the metal. He tossed it casually back onto Ren's lap. Ren caught it. The moment his hands wrapped around the hilt, the dark aura instantly calmed, settling comfortably and seamlessly against his physical density. "See?" Gojo clapped his hands together loudly. "It likes him. Yaga, we can't confiscate it. If you hand that to Shoko and the tech department, the second a researcher tries to test its cursed output, it'll blow up their entire laboratory. It's completely useless to anyone who isn't Ren." Yaga glared at the weapon, clearly deeply unsettled by the entire display. "A special grade curse tool that violently rejects all other users. Satoru, the implications of this are hilarious." Gojo interrupted, pulling his blindfold back up into place and fully covering his eyes again. "Our transfer student is a living anomaly, and now he has an anomalous katana. Maybe he really did just hold it until it evolved. Maybe the sheer density of his replicated heavenly restriction forced the metal to aggressively adapt to him. Who cares? It's strong. It's safe in his hands, and absolutely nobody can steal it." "Hold on," Yutaheim interrupted, her sharp eyes snapping away from the weapon and locking directly onto Gojo. The sheer shock of the explosion was rapidly fading, replaced by her usual, highly attuned suspicion. "What did you just say?" Gojo tilted his head, his hands shoved casually in his pockets. "I say a lot of brilliant things, Yutaheim. You'll need to be more specific." "You said replicated heavenly restriction," Yutaheim pointed out, taking a firm step forward. Her voice dropped into a demanding, dangerous tone. "You told the Kyoto staff he was just an anomalous transfer student born with a heavenly pact. What the hell do you mean by replicated?" Ren kept his face perfectly blank, but internally he winced. Gojo's big mouth had just casually dropped a massive piece of classified intel right in front of the Kyoto instructor. Gojo paused. He looked at Yutaheim, then at Ren, and finally back to Yutaheim. Instead of backpedaling or offering one of his elaborate, bullshit cover stories about intimacy transfer, a slow, notoriously obnoxious smirk spread across his face. He leaned down slightly, bringing his face closer to hers, treating her exactly like a toddler asking a complicated science question. That, Gojo said, his voice dripping with condescending sweetness. Well, you see, Yutaheim, it's a highly classified, ultra-secret Tokyo branch phenomenon. It's strictly need to know. Gojo raised a hand, holding his thumb and index finger an inch apart. And unfortunately, your cursed energy output is just a little too weak to get security clearance. It's a strength issue, really. Maybe if you practice your little songs really hard, one day you'll be strong enough to hear the big boy secrets. A very visible, thick vein popped on Yutaheim's forehead. Her face turned a brilliant, violent shade of red. I am a grade 1 instructor, you overgrown man-child. Yutaheim shrieked, her hands flying up as she completely lost her professional composure. She looked ready to draw her sword and try to bypass his infinity through sheer, unadulterated rage. I will kill you. Stop treating me like a student. See? This is exactly why you don't have clearance, Gojo teased, effortlessly dodging a half-hearted swipe from her. Way too emotional. Very untactical. Satoru, that is enough, Principal Yaga commanded, his booming voice vibrating the floorboards. He rubbed the bridge of his nose beneath his dark sunglasses, looking like a man who was actively developing a migraine. Yaga let out a heavy, deeply tired sigh. He looked from Gojo's smug grin to Yutaheim's murderous glare before settling his intimidating gaze back onto the boy sitting on the mattress. That still leaves Yutaheim's original question unanswered, Yaga rumbled, his deep voice leaving no room for deflection. He crossed his thick arms over his chest. Where exactly did you acquire this weapon, transfer student? Gojo paused his teasing and turned back. He pulled his blindfold down just a fraction, his bright blue eye blinking with genuine curiosity. Actually, yeah, I didn't bother asking when it was just a boring grade 1. But a special grade that perfectly binds to a soul? That's a completely different story. Where did you pick that up, Rinkuen? Ren stared at the 3 elite sorcerers looming over him. Internally, his mind was screaming. What am I supposed to say? I can't exactly tell them a glowing blue holographic system handed me a grade 2 katana as a reward for getting admitted to this school, and then I spent points from killing curses to upgrade it. He needed a story, something simple, something deniable. Looking down at the dark, abyss-like scabbard resting on his lap, he then met Yaga's gaze, letting his expression flatten into a mask of pure, unbothered innocence. Break time equals 0. 5s/. I was just walking down the street in Shibuya a few weeks ago, he started, voice incredibly steady and casual, and it dropped out of the sky and hit me on the head. The room went dead silent. Only the evening breeze whistling through the shattered window made a sound. It hit you on the head, Yaga repeated slowly, tone dangerously low. Yeah. He nodded, leaning into the lie with absolute terrifying commitment. It really hurt. I thought some guy just dropped a prop katana off a roof or something, but when I picked it up, I realized it was a grade 1 cursed tool. Finders keepers, I guess. Yutaheim stared. Her eyes darted from his deadpan face to the dark blade and back again. Do you actually think we are going to believe that? That is the most blatantly fabricated, insulting lie I have ever heard in my entire life. He shrugged helplessly. I'm serious. It was a very clear sky. A grade 1 cursed weapon does not just fall out of the sky, she shrieked, taking a menacing step toward the bed and pointing a shaking finger right at his nose. If you are not going to tell the truth, We will drag you down to the holding cells right now. You are going to be formally interrogated by the higher-ups until you explain exactly who is arming you, transfer student. Whoa, hold on. Stepping smoothly between them, Gojo threw his hands up in a defensive, placating gesture. Let's not jump straight to waterboarding my favorite student, Yutaheim. Satoru, he is clearly lying to our faces, she yelled, trying to step around him. Is he? He gasped dramatically, pressing a hand to his chest as if scandalized. I don't know. Tokyo is a crazy place. Curse users fly around on pelican curses all the time. Maybe one of them had a Butterfingers moment and dropped his favorite weapon right onto poor Rinkuin's head. It's a miracle he survived the blunt force trauma. Yaga rubbed his temples, a deep groan escaping his chest. Satoru, miracles of youth, principal. Beaming, the white-haired teacher wrapped a heavy, protective arm around the boy's shoulders, pulling him against his side. The universe just wanted our transfer student to have a cool katana. Who are we to argue with the sky? Yaga stared at the massive, unwavering grin. He looked back at Ren, who was still maintaining a perfectly blank, stupid expression. The principal's broad shoulders finally slumped in defeat. He simply did not have the energy to fight this sheer wall of nonsense today. I expect that written report by Friday, Yaga growled, turning abruptly. Having reached his absolute limit, he barked, Yutaheim, we are leaving. But, principal, she protested, glaring at the two of them. Now, he ducked through the ruined doorframe and marched down the hall. Letting out a frustrated scream, Yutaheim aggressively kicked a piece of splintered wood out of her way as she stomped after him, angry muttering echoing down the corridor. The heavy footsteps finally faded completely. The silence in the ruined dorm room was thick, broken only by the wind rustling the debris on the floor. Gojo dropped his protective arm. The massive, obnoxious grin slowly slid off his face, replaced by a calculating, quiet expression. Pulling his blindfold all the way down, he let it hang loosely around his neck. Both crystalline blue eyes locked directly onto Nightfall. All right, he said, voice stripped of its usual playful lilt. The adults are gone. Let me see it. Ren tightened his grip on the dark scabbard. You broke my window the last time you touched it, and I'll buy you a prettier one. The older sorcerer dismissed with a casual wave of his hand. Stepping closer, he hovered a palm just inches from the hilt. The dark, abyss-like aura of the special grade weapon immediately began to agitate, sensing the limitless cursed energy approaching. Tell it to become friends with me. Ren looked up, then down at the pitch-black steel. The system hadn't exactly provided a user manual on how to verbally negotiate with the soul bond trait. So, sticking entirely to his established brand of absolute weaponized stupidity, he held the weapon up slightly and spoke directly to the metal. Tana, become friends with Gojo Satoru. Nightfall did absolutely nothing. The dark mist continued to curl off its edges, completely unbothered. The strongest sorcerer in the world blinked slowly, an expression of profound, deeply exhausted disappointment crossing his features. He let out a long, dramatic sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the entire world. You really are a piece of work, Rinkuen. Without warning, his hand darted forward, snatching the scabbard right out of the boy's grip. The moment long fingers wrapped around the dark wood, the air in the room violently warped. Nightfall let out a shrieking, metallic hum, bleeding a dense, inky black mist that aggressively pushed against the invisible barrier of infinity. The sheer force of the rejection cracked the floorboards beneath them. Holding it for exactly 3 seconds, Gojo examined the violent reaction with a critical, glowing blue eye. Then, as quickly as he had grabbed it, he nonchalantly tossed it right back. Ren scrambled for a second, catching the heavy blade against his chest. The violent mist instantly receded into a calm, Dark hummed the moment it was safely back in his hands. Fascinating. Seamlessly pulling his blindfold back up, the terrifying, calculating aura vanished in an instant. He was back to being the carefree, obnoxious teacher. It really is like a very angry, highly radioactive guard dog. Good boy. He dusted off his hands, pivoting on his heel toward the shattered window. Anyway, Gojo announced brightly, stretching his long arms high above his head and cracking his back. As much as I'd love to drag you out to a crater somewhere and forcefully test what that thing can actually do against my infinity, alas, I am a very busy man. I have some highly critical, top-secret business to attend to right now. Ren stared at him from the mattress, his deadpan expression unwavering. Obviously, Ren said flatly. Very important. It is. Gojo insisted, stepping up onto the splintered windowsill. The cool evening wind caught his dark uniform jacket, billowing it out behind him. The fate of the jujitsu world practically rests on my shoulders right now. Don't break any more windows while I'm gone. Transfer student. With a final, sharp two-fingered salute, Gojo simply leaned backward and dropped out of the third-story window, instantly disappearing from sight. The room fell completely silent again, leaving Ren alone in the wreckage. Ren looked down at nightfall, brushing a stray splinter of wood off the dark scabbard. He let out a long, exhausted breath and looked back up at the empty, shattered window frame. Right? Very important, Ren muttered to the empty room, his voice dripping with utter sarcasm. Like we don't all know, there's a limited edition Kikufuku Mochi drop at the Kikujin Bakery today. Have fun saving the world. The next morning, the second-year dormitories were eerily quiet. The maintenance crew at Tokyo Jiu-Jitsu High operated with the terrifying, unquestioning efficiency of people who were entirely used to Satoru Gojo blowing up campus property on a weekly basis. By 8 a.m., the shattered window had been replaced, the splintered floorboards patched, and a new wooden door hung seamlessly in the frame. Thankfully, the rest of the student body had been completely dead to the world. Megumi, Nobara, and Yuji were sleeping off the brutal physical toll of the Goodwill event and the subsequent invasion. Panda and Toge had been dragged off early for debriefings. Nobody had heard the thunderclap of Gojo's limitless energy getting violently rejected. As for Nightfall, Ren didn't take any chances. The pitch-black, soul-bound katana was sitting safely inside the frictionless gray grid of his system's dimensional inventory. Out of sight, out of mind, and entirely out of the reach of Principal Yaga's technical staff, which left Ren with exactly one priority for the day. The late morning sun beat down on the concrete platform of the Shibuya train station. The weekend crowd bustled around them, a chaotic sea of civilians entirely ignorant to the existence of curses, domain expansions, or ancient sorcerers trying to end the world. Ren stood near the edge of the platform, his hands resting comfortably in the pockets of his dark denim jacket. Right next to him, Maki shifted her weight. She wasn't wearing her high-collared jiu-jitsu uniform, and her heavy, tactical weapons case was nowhere in sight. Instead, she was wearing the soft, beige-ribbed turtleneck and the high-waisted olive green skirt Ren had bought her weeks ago. Her dark green hair was tied up. Her wire-rimmed glasses caught the glare of the sun. Without the physical weight of her pole arm or the constant, looming threat of Satoru Gojo dropping out of the sky, she looked completely out of her element. She kept adjusting the hem of her sweater, her combat instincts making her highly hyper-aware of the crowds brushing past them. "Stop fidgeting," Ren murmured, leaning closer so his shoulder brushed against hers. "You look perfectly fine." "I feel exposed," Maki grumbled, crossing her arms defensively over her chest. "I'm not used to walking around without a weapon. If a curse drops out of an air vent right now, I'm gonna have to beat it to death with my bare hands." "If a curse drops out of an air vent, I'll handle it," Ren said smoothly. "You're off the clock, boss. Today is strictly civilian hours." Maki let out a heavy, slightly embarrassed sigh, dropping her arms. She looked down the long stretch of the train tracks, then back up at him. The fierce, uncompromising scowl she usually wore had entirely melted away, replaced by a rare, unguarded uncertainty. "So," Maki started, her amber eyes flicking up to meet his. A faint dusting of pink crept onto her cheeks. "Where exactly should we go?" Run tilted his head, a slow, familiar smirk spreading across his face. "Are you asking me to formulate the tactical deployment, Zenin? I thought you were the squad leader." "Shut up," she muttered, lightly elbowing him in the ribs. It didn't hurt. His heavenly restriction density absorbed the hit easily, but the contact was warm and familiar. "I don't do this. I train, I exorcise things, and I sleep. I don't know how to plan whatever this is." "A date," Rin provided helpfully. Maki's face burned a brighter shade of red. "I know the word, idiot. Just answer the question." Run let out a soft laugh, pulling one hand out of his pocket. He reached over, seamlessly intertwining his fingers with hers. Maki stiffened for a fraction of a second, the physical affection in such a public space overriding her tactical brain, before she let out a slow breath and squeezed his hand back. "We're getting as far away from Tokyo Jujutsu High as the rail lines will take us," Rin said, looking up at the digital departure board hanging over the platform. "There's a coastal town down in Kamakura. Quiet beaches, no skyscrapers, and absolutely zero chance of running into Panda or Satoru." Maki looked at their intertwined hands, the last lingering knots of tension in her shoulders finally dissolving. The idea of just existing for a few hours without having to prove her strength to the Zenin clan or keep the first years alive sounded like an absolute dream. "Kamakura," Maki repeated softly. She looked back up at him, a small, genuine smile breaking through her usual stoic mask. "Are you going to buy me food? Or do I have to fight you for it?" "I'll buy you whatever you want," Rin promised, his thumb gently brushing over her knuckles. He leaned in just a fraction closer, dropping his voice into a low, teasing register. "Though I do expect to be heavily compensated for my generosity later." Maki's eyes widened slightly, the implications hitting her instantly. The flush on her cheeks immediately spread down to her collarbone. She opened her mouth to snap a defensive insult at him, but the automated chime of the station speakers cut her off. The Rapid Express train bound for Kamakura is now arriving at Platform 4. The heavy rush of wind hit the platform as the train pulled in, the sleek metal doors sliding open with a hiss. Rin smiled, giving her hand a gentle tug toward the boarding line. "Come on, let's go disappear for a while." Maki didn't argue. She tightened her grip on his hand and followed him onto the train. The Rapid Express train rattled rhythmically as it left the dense, towering skyline of Tokyo behind, trading concrete for sweeping views of the coastline. The carriage was pleasantly sparse. Aside from an older couple quietly reading near the front and a businessman dozing against a window 2 rows up, they had the entire section to themselves. The quiet hum of the tracks and the warm sunlight streaming through the glass created a perfect, isolated bubble. Maki sat by the window, watching the city blur into greener suburbs. For the first 10 minutes of the ride, she sat with her usual rigid, perfect posture, her hands folded neatly in her lap. But as the miles ticked by and the oppressive weight of Jujutsu High faded further into the distance, the last remaining knots of tension in her spine finally unspooled. She let out a long, slow exhale. Shifting her weight, she closed the small gap between them on the plush bench seat and rested her head heavily against Ren's shoulder. Ren didn't say anything. He just smiled, shifting his arm so it rested comfortably around her waist, his thumb drawing lazy, soothing circles against the fabric of her olive green skirt. They sat like that in a comfortable, domestic silence for a while, before Maki finally spoke. "I talked to Mai yesterday," she murmured, her voice keeping to a low, private register over the clatter of the train tracks. After the debriefings, Ren rested his head lightly against hers, his eyes tracking the ocean coming into view out the window. How did that go? Did anyone draw a weapon? Almost. Maki snorted softly, though the sound lacked its usual bitterness. She was completely on edge, but it was weird. She couldn't keep her focus. She kept losing her train of thought, and she wouldn't look me in the eye. And then I finally realized why. Maki tilted her head up just enough to glare half-heartedly at the sharp line of his jaw. "It's you," she stated flatly. Ren blinked, looking down at her with genuine, mild confusion. "Me? I was practically on the other side of the campus yesterday afternoon. I didn't say a single word to her." "You didn't have to," Maki sighed. Deep, bone-weary sound. She dropped her head back down against his shoulder, her fingers absently tracing the seam of his denim jacket. "Satoru wasn't just making things up to annoy me during the baseball game. I was staring at you." She was completely flustered. "My sister actually has a crush on you." Ren's eyebrows shot up. He remembered the blinding flash of the system's preternaturally handsome trait hitting the Kyoto sniper in the courtyard, but he hadn't expected it to actually short-circuit her brain long enough to survive a conversation with her twin. "Well," Ren said smoothly, trying to navigate the absolute landmine of a topic, "I am highly charming, but I promise I didn't do anything to encourage it." "I know you didn't," Maki grumbled. She let out another heavy sigh, closing her eyes against the sunlight. "You know what the worst part is? I'm not even jealous. I should be absolutely furious. First half the girls at my high school, then Nobara throwing a fit at a boutique, and now my estranged, trigger-happy twin sister." Maki rubbed her forehead against his jacket, sounding profoundly defeated by the sheer biology of the situation. "I wanted to be mad," she confessed quietly. "But I looked at her getting all red in the face, and then I looked at you, and I completely ran out of energy. I can't even blame them anymore. You just have this stupid, unfair, perfect face, and it's apparently a hazard to the general public. It's just my normal life now. I'm too exhausted to fight every girl who realizes you're gorgeous." Ren let out a low, genuine laugh. The sheer resignation in her voice was both hilarious and deeply endearing. He turned his head, pressing a warm kiss into her dark green hair. Ren didn't offer any more clever remarks or empty promises. He didn't need to. He simply kept his arms securely anchored around her waist, resting his cheek lightly against the top of her head. He let the rhythmic, swaying clatter of the train tracks do the rest of the work. Within minutes, Maki's breathing evened out, her combat-wired instincts finally surrendering to the absolute safety of the isolated carriage. She slept for the entire remainder of the ride, only waking up when the automated voice announced their arrival at Kamakura Station. Stepping out of the station, the oppressive, heavy atmosphere of Tokyo vanished completely, replaced by the crisp, salty air of the ocean breeze. For the next several hours, they didn't talk about cursed spirits, the Goodwill event, or the Zenin clan. They just existed. They walked along the sandy coastline of Yokohama Beach, letting the cool wind whip through their hair. Ren bought them iced coffees and overpriced street food, warm crepes, and grilled seafood skewers, completely ignoring Maki's token protests about him spending his money. They wandered through quiet, retro tourist streets and browsed through small storefronts. For Maki, it was a surreal, intoxicating experience. Without her heavy weapons case or her dark uniform, the civilians around them didn't look at her like a weapon, a sorcerer, or a failure of a major clan. They just looked at her like a normal high school girl on a date with her ridiculously handsome boyfriend. By the time the afternoon faded, she had completely dropped her guard, her hand resting naturally in Ren's jacket pocket alongside his own. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, The sky bruised into deep shades of purple and gold. The coastal air grew chilly, and the streets began to empty out. They sat together on a low concrete seawall, listening to the waves crash against the shore. Maki pulled out her phone, the bright screen illuminating her face in the gathering dark. "We should figure out where we're staying," she muttered, her thumb swiping through a hotel booking app. "Unless you're planning on using that ridiculous heavenly restriction of yours to sleep on the beach. I'm pretty durable now, but I draw the line at getting sand in my shoes," Rin joked, leaning over to look at her screen. "Find anything good? There's a quiet in a few blocks off the main strip," Maki said, tapping the screen to confirm the reservation. "Nothing fancy, but it has good reviews and it's out of the way. It's ours for the night." They hopped off the seawall and started the short walk toward the hotel. Few streets down, the bright, glowing neon sign of a convenience store cut through the quiet, dimly lit neighborhood. "Hold on," Rin said, gently tugging her hand to stop near the automatic sliding doors. "Need to grab a few essentials for the night."
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going. Plus, it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.